Cunningham. Honeywell has locked out 340 workers at its South Bend, Indiana plant rather than allowed them to continue to work while labor contract talks continue. UAW Local 9 President Adam Stevenson says the union was open to negotiating with Honeywell the whole time talks were going on, but when the workers rejected the latest Honeywell contract proposal, the company locked them out. The union is citing at least two issues in the company proposal they don't like: changes to their health care and the use of outside contractors. Honeywell claims its offer was competitive and comprehensive, but nothing but the company's own decision keeps it from allowing the union workers to keep working while they continue to talk with them about a new contract. Honeywell is trying to lock the workers out and keep the plant operating. The Chicago Teachers Union says it has a $502 million Chicago Public Schools revenue recovery package that Mayor Rahm Emanuel and the Chicago City Council should implement. CTU's Jackson Potter.
They've painted a picture where either teachers suffer draconian cuts in classrooms, either budget slashed, or Springfield comes to the rescue. And there's no other alternative besides those two pathways to the following school year. And what we've contended in our revenue package, our recovery package, is there are, in fact, alternatives, that they are misrepresenting reality. In the meantime, children shouldn't suffer. Chicago Public Schools shouldn't be handed over to private interests.
CTU and the district have been in negotiations for over a year on a new labor contract for teachers. The Chicago Teachers Union says the problems city public schools are facing revolve around the failure of leadership, the consistent, troubling disregard of community, parent, and educator voice, and the lack of equitable funding for Chicago schools. The United Food and Commercial Workers Union says it's had its 100th organizing win in 2016. UFCW President Mark Perrone says that a national conversation about wealth inequality is occurring in packing houses and on the floors of retail stores all over the country. He says UFCW has 100 examples of how those conversations are moving workers to form a union and take action. Perrone says workers are realizing that partnering with an established union can help secure the wages and benefits that put them on a path to a better life. The UFCW says workers in 26 out of 50 states have already joined this year, and over 50% of UFCW locals have had successful organizing drives.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Retirement security front and foremost. Don't know if you saw the big report Friday by Bloomberg saying what I think we already all know. The very well-to-do, and the rest of us, well, not so much. In fact, the push towards the 401k that was gonna make us all millionaires. We were all gonna be rich. We're gonna all be stinking rich. hasn't worked out that way. And in fact, I've told this story got to be 1,000 times by now. I remember when I first started, one of the jobs I had for a very long time, worked for 18 years for one company. And when I first started, they go, son, you're going to be a millionaire 30 years from now. You're going to retire millionaire. And I remember going to the guy, look, I may be young, but I'm not dumb. There's no way the wealth class of this country, there's no way the powers to be are going to allow a dumb truck driver to have $1 million, especially if you're the one administering it. And the reality is here we are, it was 18 years doing the job. That was, I gave that up about 6 years ago. Somewhere around 200,000 right now. I seriously doubt those last 12 years were going to put me over the top. Really, just doubt it, completely doubt it. But, hey, maybe it's possible. But what I saw is thanks to recession after recession after recession, and then the big one in 2008, that $1 million I was going to have kind of faded off. And that's what I had predicted back then. Look, on paper, great idea, works well. On paper, does fairly well. The problem is there are lots of ways to borrow from that. Either it be theft on Wall Street or just life in general, which is why at the time I said, just give me a defined benefit pension fund, which I know when I retire, I'm going to get this much, and this is going to last me for the rest of my life. The problem is, even the people who have tried to squirrel away what they can, they're getting to the point to where it's not living as long as they are. That's a problem. So we're going to talk about that. Lots to get to. The strike at Verizon that's going on, and maybe a little gambling. In the UK, I guess they gamble on just about everything, and they're gambling on the U.S. elections. So I'm interested to find out from the UK's perspective, how crazy are we, and where the money's at? Where are the gamblers? Where are they betting this November? That'll be interesting to talk about. Yesterday, I brought up a report that The Hill was reporting on about from the Brookings Center, the Urban/Brookings Institute Tax Policy Center, that said that the working class of this country was going to do very well under Bernie Sanders' proposal. And I got a bunch of emails from people saying, yes, well, maybe, well, no, because debt, lots of debt, scare, bad. I saw. Yes, there was going to be an explosion. A $33 trillion spending explosion. We were going to be so far in debt, it was going to make Obama look like a penny pincher. Someone actually said that. I loved that. That it was a great, I hope there's a right winger who's going to take credit for that. I hope there's a right wing talk show host who's going to take credit for that, because I'm sure this guy didn't make that up on his own. Make Obama look like a penny pincher. Here's the reality. And what Bernie Sanders was talking about is, funding education, funding health care, funding a lot of the social safety net programs that other countries are already doing. And yes, it's going to be an increase in taxes over the next several years. It's going to happen. And he's actually said that. Politico had a report out that was just scaring everybody to death because the scary socialists are coming. And that's not quite what was being said. Even like I said, the Tax Policy Center was saying, we're going to have this huge debt. Well, the Sanders campaign pushed back against the Tax Policy Center's statements. They said that it was inaccurate and it was one-sided because it didn't look at the benefits that we would get. It didn't look at the health care spending that we wouldn't be making. It wouldn't be doing a lot of that. And you know what happened? And this is where you got to give the Tax Policy Center a little bit of credit. I don't know that a right-wing think tank would do this, but the guy who's the director of the Tax Policy Center, a guy named Len Berman, actually agreed with the Sanders camp and said he thought the Sanders camp had a point. And they went back and they looked at the numbers and they brought everything into account. And what they came up with, according to the Tax Policy Center, that the average U.S. household in this country would gain about $4,300 a year under the Sanders plan. What they found was the tax burden for the average family, the tax burden would go up about $9,000 a year in 2017. But, and this is the other side of this, but the benefits that we would get from it would be in the range of more than $13,000. So there's a gap of $4,300, which we benefit from. And you go, but who's gonna pay for that? Well, the reality is we're going to go back to a sane, rational tax code where the millionaires and billionaires they're going to have to chip in a little bit more. The reality is the pendulum has swung way too far off to the wealth classes side of things. And maybe now we need to start pulling back on some of this. The Tax Policy Center even went as far to say as, those families who are below the top 5%, that would be people, not the 1%, that top 5%, people below the, they would be ahead to the tune of about $10,000 a year, the low income folks at the very bottom. And all the way through the people at the top 5% is how they wrote it. So everybody but the top 5% is going to see some benefit. And you go, but, what about the top 5%? And I got to be honest, I struggle making a defense for someone making $1 billion a year. I struggle making a defense for someone making $18,000 or $18 million a year, like we see the Verizon CEO. Kind of struggle with that, especially when we have millions of people who are still uninsured. We have millions of children who go to bed hungry. We have people who are homeless. And as I talked about yesterday, the idea of a guaranteed minimum income seems rational and sane to me. This idea that we say, as a society, we stop with all of the Band-Aid programs and all of the things that can be that are really political poison pills. Understand, if you suggest that Granny needs additional help to put food on the table, somebody is going to be able to complain about that instead of just saying everybody needs to have food on their table. Everybody needs to figure out how to feed their kids and have a roof over their head. Because look, at the end of the day, where we're heading, and this is not new. None of this stuff is new. At the end of the day, automation and technology is going to continue to dwindle the number of jobs that are available for the working class. Now, not everyone is going to be a rocket scientist. Not everyone is going to be a doctor or a lawyer, and nor should they be. But at the end of this is about talking about how to have an economy where everyone can participate and the entrepreneurs and the other folks go and are able to start businesses and run businesses and be able to profit and have consumers. At some point, capitalism does one thing really well. It consolidates wealth and power into the hands of a few, and it shuts a lot of other people out. Question is, how do you save capitalism by not shutting those people out and letting them participate? I've always said the guaranteed minimum income seems reasonable and rational. But it'll be interesting to see how they respond, the fearmongers, to this most recent statement by the Tax Policy Center that actually, while we were scaring you to death with the big numbers in spending, the big numbers in spending are actually going to be good for the country and actually going to get the economy moving, more people having jobs, more income going to different people. Good stuff. It's called economic activity. It's the snowball. And I'm all in favor of it. The good thing is, I think with Bernie pushing all this stuff out, we may be pushing Hillary a little bit in that direction, and even in a weird kind of way, even Trump a bit. So it will be quite interesting to talk about. Also today, the West Virginia and Nebraska primaries. We'll get to that with Bob Weiner later in the program. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to find out what's going on the picket line there in Verizon. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day that as many as 90,000 people rallied for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment in Grant Park in Chicago, Illinois. The proposed amendment to the Constitution read, "Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." The idea to amend the Constitution to ensure equal rights for women was first proposed by Alice Paul in 1923. In the late 1960s, with the second wave feminist movement, the push for the amendment gained momentum. At the time, women only made 59 cents for each dollar earned by men. Not all labor leaders supported the Equal Rights Amendment. Some worried that the proposed constitutional amendment would nullify existing labor protections for women in the workforce. They instead advocated for legislation around specific issues faced by women. Myra K. Wolfgang, a vice president of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees and Bartenders International Union, testified against the ERA before the Senate in 1970. The ERA passed Congress in 1972, but in order for the amendment to go into effect, 38 states had to ratify it. 30 quickly did so, but then a backlash against the legislation began to gain momentum. Illinois was the only northern state that was a holdout for ratifying the amendment. A massive rally was planned. That morning, the Chicago Tribune described the crowd that was expected, including representatives from labor, religion, show business, politics, and the home. Despite this massive turnout, the Equal Rights Amendment failed to win enough support in Illinois. The amendment fell 3 states short of becoming the law of the land. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I'm Edward James Olmos, and I'm here with my local letter carriers and store clerks from the United Food and Commercial Workers to remind you that Saturday, May 14th is the annual Stamp Out Hunger food drive. The reality of hunger in our communities is disturbing. 1 in 7 Americans does not have enough to eat. That includes seniors, children, even military veterans. But you can help in the fight against hunger, and it's easy. Just leave a bag of non-perishable food by your mailbox the morning of Saturday, May 14th, and your letter carrier will do the rest. All food collected goes directly to food banks and pantries in your community. Hunger in America is a real problem, but we can all be part of the solution. Saturday, May 14th, please join me, the National Association of Letter Carriers, and their partners, and stamp out hunger.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
One of these days I'm gonna blow my top, and that sucker, he's gonna pay. Lord, I can't wait to see their faces when I get the nerve to say, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So, looks like the CWA members who have been striking for the last, I guess we're going into 4 weeks now. I think that's how long this job action's been going on. And the stories that I'm seeing of needless injuries, customer dissatisfaction, and really mounting tensions really have me kind of concerned, because I don't know if there's any movement going on. That's why we've asked Jim Gardler to come talk with us. He's the president of CWA Local 13,000 here in Pennsylvania. Jim, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on the show again, Rick. I appreciate it.
So, we're entering week 4, right?
We are actually preparing. After tomorrow, we'll be entering week 5.
Wow. Did you think this was going to take this long?
Be honest with you, it's one of them things where going into it, it's going to be a fight, and we knew the way the company was acting at the bargaining table that this could have the potential to be a long fight. But I know our members are prepared for it.
Right.
They're prepared for a long fight with the company here.
When you enter into this thing, you're in it for the long run, and it's one day longer. But I look at this, and I got to be honest, as someone who looks at a business who's extraordinarily profitable, and the numbers I've seen and I've quoted are just mind-boggling. Why you would disrupt that kind of money-making machine is beyond me.
Well, I think it goes back to the premise of a lot of what we were bringing back to the public, which is that the corporate greed that goes on across this country is rampant right now. And Verizon is one of the, culprits that are creating this problem. And when you look at what is going on, especially right now, it's one thing to fight with your employees over, different things like work and wanting to have that work or having the ability to contract out that work. It's another thing to also look at what they're doing to their customers right now. And clearly, the lack of concern for the customer base that's out there that is suffering as a result of what the company pushed us to do is just ridiculous. And to try to tout that the company is keeping up with the workload, we know that's not true. We know that the workforce that they put out there doesn't have the proper training. I mean, our guys are trained for over years to have the expertise that they have in the field today, and the company is saying they're putting people out there after 2 weeks training.
Wow.
That's just mind-boggling.
Well, I mean, the other part of that is also the minimization of your skills. I mean, they want to make it, and the public, what they want the public to think is that you're not skilled workers. You're just, they can put anybody into this position. And I got to wonder, what is it about us that we buy it?
Well, I mean, there's an easy way to explain that, Rick, and look at how technology has evolved over the last decade. I mean, look at what was going on in the 90s. People were putting second lines in for computers. Right. Now you're talking about light that's traveling through glass that gives you speeds that are ridiculously fast to the point where people can download and watch movies, right in their house through the Wi-Fi signal that's coming as a result of the fiber that our members bring to those people.
But here's the thing, Jim. I mean, as technology gets bigger and better and as all of this stuff upgrades, the people who are putting this stuff in, they have to be able to keep up with it as well. I don't think you can just grab somebody off the street, knock them on the head with a wrench, and congratulations, you're now our tech guy.
Yeah, well, that's what the company would like to have the public believe. But, I mean, everybody has to be smarter to realize that that's not possible.
So let's
like I said, the types of reports we're getting back from our members, with some of these contractors that they're bringing in, and I'd like to refer to them as the scabs that they're bringing in all across the state of Pennsylvania. It's comical. I mean, someone sent me a video last night of a guy who is in a bucket truck that when he was up working on the pole, the bucket that was raised and extended broke. It stopped working. The guy had to climb down the pole that was right there next to the bucket truck because he could not get the vehicle to retract the bucket in order for him to get back safely.
Wow.
And these are the unsafe working conditions that not only they put the people that they're having scab work out there doing right now, but they put the public at risk as well.
Good point. I mean, what happens if that guy does something to operate that bucket truck in a way that maybe a kid gets run over or something happens? It's horrible. But I've been watching on the Facebook pages and stuff going on, just some really bizarre stuff. In fact, the one video I watched was a guy who almost got killed, and he didn't even realize he had almost gotten killed until the guy pointed out, one of the guys on strike pointed out, this is what you did, dum-dum. And, it's one of those moments.
There was a situation, I believe, reports came back to us in New Jersey that they were trying to set a pole, and they actually dropped the pole on a customer's house.
Now that's kind of funny in a way, as long as no one got hurt. I mean, that's kind of comical in a way, on some level, isn't it?
But I would love to say it's comical, but what you have to really look at is you can only get a pass, and with these mistakes happening for so long before somebody really does get injured, right. And that's where this company just doesn't seem to care. Like I said, the focus I'm looking at are the customers. Yeah, someone's out there thinking that they're I want my service, I want my TV working, I want my internet working, and next thing you know, there's a catastrophe occurring.
There's a pole in the front yard, and look, I mean, it may be funny for a Three Stooges skit or Laurel and Hardy or something like that, one of the slapstick comedies, but in real life, this is really very deadly serious, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and that's the part of it that most people take for granted, that everybody is out there and they know they should be working safely. But come on, they got a bunch of gypsies up here that they're bringing in to scab out this work because they don't want to sit here and bargain in good faith with the CWA and the IBEW.
Yeah, and you got to imagine, you got to wonder how much they're paying these scabs, and why not just come to the table and negotiate so that you get good quality work at a reasonable expense instead of paying, from what I've heard, almost double what they'd be paying you guys to do the jobs, and also the kind of people that you're getting. Anybody who would scab on another person's job, not worth much to begin with. But I've heard reports of people carrying knives and guns into people's homes and all kinds of insanity.
We've been getting reports all across the state of people coming across these contractors carrying firearms on their bodies, on their person, while they're out there keeping firearms in the vehicles. Somebody sent us a situation where 2 guys were arrested in New York, I believe, when one of the contractors pulled out a machete on the job.
Wow. A machete?
These are the type of people that you're dealing with right here. They're telling me that several of these individuals are driving around with either suspended license, unregistered vehicles. It's just incomprehensible what this company is going through the lengths to get people to come in here and try to scab out this work.
It's amazing.
And to our members, credit, everybody is staying focused in this fight with Verizon. They're out there day in and day out, performing what we are allowed to perform in terms of picketing, either at wireless locations and on the job where they have these contractors working. I can't speak highly enough about the job that the members of the IBEW and the CWA are doing all across the state.
And the other part of this, I guess, Jim, as a customer who needs help, who has a problem, who's going to be calling Verizon for customer service to have someone come into your home, I think you have to really question who it is that's walking into your house.
They're finding, and I want to correct what I said earlier, this is entering the 4th week. They're going to find a way within 4 weeks, Rick, to just ruin their brand name. A name that our members have, gone out and performed exceptional service to give people the quality product that's out there, and they're going to find a way in 4 weeks to ruin that brand name.
That's incredible to me. So I guess what message does that send to you and your members when the company's willing to destroy itself to deny you the voice on the job, or to deny you the job that they want to send overseas?
Well, I think what our guys have to do, our guys and girls that are out there, is stay the course. We continue to prepare proposals that we are hopeful will clear this logjam at the bargaining table, will get us the contract that our members want and our members deserve, and be able to get them back on a job to provide the services and the repair that the customers expect and have gotten for years and years.
In your opinion, what's the main issue that you guys are out on the picket line over? Is it the jobs issue? Is it the issue of being sent all over the country like transit labor? What is it?
It is definitely the jobs issues, and it is the transfer issue that will uproot people's lives. There are situations out here in some of these centers and some of the language that the company's presenting where they want to be able to transfer people for up to 60 days at a time, uprooting them from whatever it is they do, not only in their professional life, but in their personal lives. All right. And there's people in centers across the state that they just want to close for no rhyme or reason, because the buildings themselves, in many circumstances, aren't going away. Those buildings are established Verizon facilities that house other individuals that perform functions for this company that will continue to be there, even if they were to have those people transferred out of those locations. So there's no rhyme or reason behind it, not to mention, and this is the biggest issue for us, is the offshoring of work and the contracting out of work that our members perform each and every day for the customers in these call centers.
And to me, that's really one of the big issues that I think people should really, grab onto, because at some point we in this country have to push back against these multinational corporations who keep shipping our jobs overseas and then keep saying, "Oh, buy our products."
And they're running overseas to hand these jobs over to people to pay them low wages, ridiculously low benefits, if any benefits at all. Okay, and they want to try and, have the public think that, yeah, I'm getting a Verizon employee. You're not. You're getting somebody that's being paid, slave wages to perform a job function that they could have people in these states, in these communities where these customers live. Those people that live in those communities could be performing these jobs.
Yep.
Yet they want to offshore them to other places and can leave people unemployed right here in the United States.
As I said to Governor Wolf yesterday when we had him on the program, I said, I might be able to hear you now, but I can't understand you. And to me, that's a problem, because evidently the governor tried to call your CEO yesterday to say, hey, get back to the table as one CEO to another. This isn't helpful for your workforce. It isn't helpful for customers. It's not good for the Commonwealth. But your CEO, Lowell McAdams, didn't pick up. I guess he couldn't hear him.
Yeah, I guess the phone lines weren't working there for the CEO. So maybe if they can get us some proposals across this bargaining table that can get us back to work, we can get our people out there to take care of that.
Fix it fast away. The website, CWALocal13,000.org. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Last question I've got for you. As this continues on, and sadly it looks like the company has dug in as they've cut off the employees' health care, and in my view, as another way to twist arms and punish. How can we help? What can our listeners do? What can I do to help folks out?
Well, across the state, what we've done already is we've set up some members' relief funds at the national level and also at the local level. If you go on either our local website, which you just announced, or also Local 13,000's Facebook page, or our International District 213, CWA District 213 website, there are different links that will set you up if you wanted to make a contribution to the defense funds. And we're using that for basic necessities, Rick, like food, putting food on the table, things like that to help our members out during this time of need while we're going through this fight with the company. But also, if you see them out there on the picket lines, stop and walk with them for a little bit. Stop and chat it up, what's going on, and, just keep lifting their spirits up. That's what I would ask the general public to do, or, obviously we've been getting a ton of support from other trades and the public already. But just get out there and show support, because at some point, while we're going through this process, our hope is that we can bring these jobs back into the United States, where the company is keeping them offshore or trying to offshore more of them right now, and people can have opportunities, or their kids can have opportunities at those jobs in the future.
There you go. Jim Gardler, I appreciate the time, man. Keep it up.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
One day longer. Jim Gardler, president of CWA Local 13,000. Again, if you want to check out their website, CWALocal13,000.org. That's it. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Be a lousy scab, or will you be a man?
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour news update recorded on Tuesday, May 10th, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. The International Labour Organization has started a major initiative to study the future of employment with an emphasis on job loss. The ILO is the UN agency focused on matters of work in the world. It has been conducting a series of workshops on the issue of technological change and the future of work ahead of its annual conference of member states to be held in June. One of the researchers working with the ILO to study employment and tech change is Jayati Ghosh, a professor of economics at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi.
We need to distinguish between productive technological change and disruptive. Productive change is that which increases the productivity of human labor, and that's good because we do want to reduce drudgery. We do want to actually make things easier for people. We want human labor to be able to perform better. And we should think of ways of managing that change by taking the surpluses that are generated in those activities and using that in labor-intensive activities that improve human welfare. So in the care economy, in artistic and creative activities, in organic agriculture, in handicraft production, these are all things that will improve our quality of life. The other kind of technological change is disruptive. That is to say, the kinds of new technologies that enable changes in the organization of work and production and distribution. So what I am calling the Uberization of work, which is to say that technology enables companies to come up that are just aggregators. And therefore, workers are reduced to piece rate providers of goods or services. That's bad, because what that does is really reduce workers' bargaining power, make them bear all the costs and risks of production, and actually reduce their ability to demand from the employers the minimum worker protection. So I believe that the second kind of disruptive technological change is less desirable. And what we should be doing is thinking of ways to regulate that to make sure that workers don't lose out on basic protection.
Labor Start, the international labor movement's news and campaigning service, held a global conference of correspondents and union activists in Toronto, May 6th to 8th. Labor Start aggregates news about labor events and runs online petitions in support of union campaigns. More than 300 unionists from 17 countries participated in the Toronto conference. One of the participants at the Labor Start conference was Jim Eicher, the president of the British Columbia Teachers Federation. The BCTF represents some 40,000 teachers in Canada's most western province. A major issue at the Labor Start conference was the privatization of education around the world. I asked Mr. Eicher about the state of privatization in the educational sector of British Columbia.
Privatization of education around the world and in British Columbia, too, is a strong concern of ours. We have a number of private schools in British Columbia, and in this day of age of major public underfunding, we call it systemic underfunding by our Liberal government in British Columbia for the last 15 years. We've seen the growth and rise of private school funding, where our government now gives about $340 million to private schools, and we think that that money should be redirected to our public schools. We have no issue of parents choosing which school they want to, but it should not be subsidized by any public dollars.
Let me ask you about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. As you know, the TPP is a huge trade deal that has been negotiated by 12 countries representing about 40% of the world's GDP. What does the British Columbia Teachers Federation think of the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
We're not supportive of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and we're hoping that the federal government actually does not agree to this because of the implications not only for education, for teachers, but for British Columbia, working people, and our society as a whole. And we oppose it. We've opposed other free trade agreements.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Belanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
The bar's still open, but man, it's slow. The tip jar's light and the register's low. The bartender don't have much to say. The regular crowd gets thinner each day. Some have maxed out all their credit cards. Some are working 2 jobs and living in cars. Minimum wage won't pay for a roof, won't pay for a drink. If you gotta have proof, just try it yourself, Mr. CEO. See how far $5.15 an hour will go. Take a part-time job at one of your stores. I bet you can't make it here anymore.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Jim sent me an email yesterday asking if I had seen the new rules on overtime pay coming out of the Obama administration. And, you know, the reality is I've been waiting for the comment period to be over. I've been waiting for the final implementation by the Department of Labor. And for those who don't know what Jim was asking about, you may remember last year we spent a lot of time talking about this. Right now, you can be labeled as a manager, as an exempt salaried employee, and make as little as $23,660 or $455 a week. So if you made $455 a week, you could work 100 hours and not fall under the time and a half rules. What the Obama administration wants to do is wants to raise that floor. The last time that this was raised was 2004, 12 years ago. It has not gone up since. And, you know, there are some who are saying, look, it's about time that you get this loophole out and really let the exemption was put into place. And this was how it was explained to me last year. The exemption was put into place because you've got, you know, managerial types, you know, the people who are overseeing and doing that stuff, working, you know, 50, 60 hours a week, but making big money. And the exemption was put in there of saying, you know, these are management people. This isn't that kind of work stuff. These are career people, and they should be exempt from all of those rules because, you know, they may have to put in extra hours one week and all of that stuff. We need that flexibility. So, you know, back in the 70s, you know, people who were in the exempt category were making considerably more money than were the average working person. Now you look at what's going on, especially in the fast food and retail industry. As now I could just pay $23,660 and work somebody as long as they're willing to come to work. 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, if they're willing to do it. And the Obama administration is saying, no, we need to change that. We need to reward work. We need to make sure that those who are least able to fight for themselves, because look, you know, most of the jobs where you have these salaried exempt positions, especially in retail and fast food, these are tenuous at best. I mean, people that I've talked to who have done them have said, look, you know, we could come in tomorrow and be fired for no reason whatsoever. So if we squawk about how little we make, they just send us down the road. And at a time where the economy not really all that great for folks in this category, tough for them to demand better wages, hours, and conditions. So Obama is saying that, and they want the Department of Labor to raise that floor up to $50,444, which has the fast food industry losing their mind. And Jim sent an article that quotes Wendy's as one of the people who have complained against it. And, you know, the woman, Mary Schell is her name. She's the Change Senior Vice President of Public Affairs. She wrote a letter last year to the Department of Labor after the rule was proposed and said, look, you know, hey, we just can't pay that. Our margins are so slim. Yet we make billions of dollars a year. She says, you know, Wendy's believes in paying employees fairly and consistent with the economic realities of our industry. So if everyone else is exploiting, we should be able to, is basically what that says. She went on to write, it may mean that we and those in our industry will be forced to consider reducing hours. That's kind of the point. You shouldn't be working somebody 60, 70 hours a week, 40 hours. That's what we've said is a full-time job. That's what this is really about. You don't want to pay overtime? Hire more people. Pretty simple. She goes on to say eliminating positions and increasing automation. Threats? Yes. To me, the reality in this is if you don't want to pay overtime, don't. Just don't do it. Does that seem reasonable? Does it seem rational? Now, some could argue $50,444 a jump from $23,660 is a bit excessive. There's some talk that the threshold could actually be somewhere around $47,000. But to me, it has to go up. You have to disincentivize this handing out of titles. Granted, you can't feed your kids, and you've got to go to the state asking for school lunch programs and food stamps and heating assistance and rent assistance and all that stuff. But you got a nice title and a shiny little thing to go on your shirt that says you're the manager or the assistant manager. I don't know that that's enough. Maybe, just maybe, what we should be doing is raising that floor and making sure that work does pay. Seems rational. I look here in Pennsylvania on the other side of this. You look at the minimum wage. Because, I talked to some of these managers who are making less than minimum wage. And you go, how's that possible that they're working, that they're making less than minimum wage? Well, think about it for a second. If you're working 70 hours a week at $450 a week, you're making a lot less than minimum wage. And that's what happens sometimes in these industries. But on the minimum wage front, there's still those pushing the $10.10 an hour, or at least $10.10 an hour, which, at some point I'm hoping we get around to pushing through. The numbers out there are saying that it could add about $1.9 billion in new wages to the local economy, which means people doing the same jobs working now would have more money in their pockets to go out and spend. About 2/3 of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania supports increasing the minimum wage at least $10.10 an hour, including 53% of registered Pennsylvania Republicans. It also would raise $225 million in tax revenue for the state. So there might be something to go, hey, we can fund education. Might not be a bad idea. 61% of small business owners nationally support raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. 80% of business executives support raising their state's minimum wage. Nearly 1.3 million Pennsylvania workers would get a raise if we went to $10.10 an hour, of which 87% of these workers are over 20 years old. So that whole myth of they're all just pimply-faced teenagers, not the case. Here's the reality. It's been a decade since we've raised the wage here in Pennsylvania. Just is what it is. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. Rick at thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
Coal mining is a filthy business. Literally, miners not only get covered in the soot of their trade, but also suffer the suffocating death called black lung. The industry explodes mountaintops, contaminates mountain streams and drinking water, and causes both acid rain and climate change. Then there are the murders. Oh, they're not called murders, but intentionally sending workers 1,000 feet underground into poorly ventilated tunnels filled with explosive methane gas and coal dust without providing proven safety equipment amounts to signing a murder contract with the Lord of the Underground. That's what Don Blankenship did as CEO of Massey Energy. Recklessly pushing profits over safety, he oversaw the corporate murder of 29 West Virginia miners and the predictable horror of an enormously violent detonation deep inside Massey's Upper Big Branch mine in 2010. Now, at long last, Boss Blankenship has been convicted and sentenced in federal court. Not for murder, though. Under our nation's feeble Mine Safety Act, killing 29 miners is a misdemeanor, and the punishment handed down to this multimillionaire corporate crime boss was merely 1 year in jail and a $250,000 fine. Such soft-on-crime leniency is not the fault of the jury or judge. They did the most with what the law allows for punishing industrial criminals. In fact, Blankenship is the first mining CEO ever convicted of conspiring to violate safety protections for miners. Rather, our corrupt corporate-serving Congress critters are to blame. Key lawmakers have taken millions of dollars in campaign donations from barons like Blankenship in exchange for reducing corporate murder to a misdemeanor. This is Jim Hightower saying, the filthiest thing about big coal is its immoral use of filthy political money to let its bosses literally get away with murder.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown.
You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
They believe in teachers' unions. We believe in teachers.
What they do? They smile in your face. All the time they want to take your place. The backstabbers. Backstabbers. They smile in your face. All the time they want to take your place. The backstabbers.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. At least that's the view that they want you to believe. The Chris Christies, the Stephen Blooms, the crazy radical way out Republicans who go, oh, we believe in teachers. Yeah, as long as they're pliable and poor and they don't ever ask any questions or do anything to educate our children. Just push the tests. Pimp the tests. That's really what we want. We want temp workers. And what's amazing to me is, well, they're pushing it full bore. You may remember yesterday when I talked with Governor Wolf, I asked him about ALEC having their big legislative conference in Pittsburgh and if he expected anything to come out of that. Well, lo and behold, here's one of those model bills rearing its ugly head. About 2 months ago, the folks at the Center for Media and Democracy published their piece, Cashing In on Kids, 172 ALEC bills to push privatization in 2015. And they went through, a whole bunch of these really well-named pieces of legislation that would attempt to destroy public education. A couple of them being the idea that we're going to do away with tenure, we're going to do away with seniority, we're going to do away with the ability of teachers to have a bit of job security, and we're going to rate them only on what we deemed as their performance, obviously tied to these bad tests. And you go, they're getting their money's worth because the article today. The Senate approved their performance their performance legislation that would that would give these school districts the ability to lay off and fire teachers based on the teacher's performance. Now, understand, we can already fire teachers for bad performance. What they're saying is if we just want to get rid of the highly paid ones, the ones who have worked their way up through the contract and done the time and continued their education, master's degree, PhDs, we want to get rid of them. And we want to break down any ability to have any job security. Because, it's for the children, don't you know? Like my representative, Stephen Bloom, who said, well, I'd want to add economic reasons. Those high-paid teachers, we should get rid of them first. That's really what he's saying. If the school district's in trouble, you know what? We're just going to lay off people because of economic reasons. Instead of saying, hey, we need to raise revenue to keep good, qualified, long-term teachers in the classroom. Anyway, the Senate approved this nonsensical piece of legislation, which is not going to get signed. I don't believe the governor is going to sign it, according to his spokesperson. But it was passed 26-22 in the Senate, 191 in the House back in June. No Democrats supported it. In the Senate, only one Democrat voted for it, and that would have been Anthony Williams, who on education is far off to the right wing as well. The thing that gets me, and this is one of those really frustrating moments where you look at the goal of all of this stuff is to really turn our teachers into temp workers. They're just here to hand out the tests. That's all it is. And, in Philadelphia, for instance, they tried to have like a temp hall for substitute teachers. And we were supposed to get Jerry Jordan on the program, the president of the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, to talk about this, but they've got a big Supreme Court case coming up tomorrow. Evidently, the district there tried to hire this Source, the number 4 teachers group that has evidently failed and failed miserably. So what has the district decided to do? I believe what they've suggested is now they're going to go out and get Kelly Services to supply them teachers. And you go, hold on a second. Wait 1 minute. Hold on. So I understand you're going to set up a specific temp agency that's going to attract only teachers, and they're going to vet them, and they're going to be run by I can sort of maybe kind of get that a little bit, that you're going to have but really Kelly Services, the people who you go to when you need a janitor, or you need a forklift driver, we're really now throwing teachers into that? And the answer is yes. The answer is absolutely. And what's interesting to me is the University of California, Berkeley, just put out a report on producing. It's called Producing Poverty: The Public Costs of Low-Wage Production Jobs in Manufacturing. And you hear a lot of this. We're bringing manufacturing jobs back, and you find that according to their numbers, a third of families on frontline manufacturing production jobs are enrolled in one or more public safety program. They're getting food stamps, they're getting heating assistance, they're getting rent help, they're getting something. And for those workers employed through staffing agencies, this is why I bring this up. Through staffing agencies like, Kelly Services maybe, the percentage of those families utilizing safety net programs jumps to 50%. Right at the similar rate, right at the same rate as fast food workers. So basically what we're doing, and now come with me on this because this is the game plan. We're going to take the profession of teaching all the way back to being equal to that of fast food workers, because that's what the Chris Christies and the Stephen Blooms and the Republicans and the Anthony Williams, that's what they believe teachers are worth. Yeah, we can get a temp worker to come and hand out the test, because it's really not about a profession. It's really not about someone spending a lifetime in a career honing their craft and becoming familiar with their material to share with the next generation. No. It's simply about plopping down a corporate test in front of our children and giving them a pencil to fill in the bubble. That's all it is. That's how they view education. So it's not surprising to me that the ALEC kind of legislation has hit our door. I mean, it really, honestly and truthfully, it does not surprise me whatsoever. Not even a little bit. What is surprising to me is we haven't revolted yet. What is surprising is we haven't gone running and screaming into the streets. And I'm hoping that we'll get Jerry Jordan tomorrow on the program to talk about the lawsuit that the case they've got in front of the Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania. And also this, because really, I mean, think about what I just said. We are literally, the Philadelphia School District, one of the largest school districts in the state of Pennsylvania, is going to a temp service to fill its teaching needs because things have gotten so bad that people are fleeing the district. Because, I don't know about you, but I don't know that I would want to work in a situation where the funding isn't there. You got to worry about all the time. Are we going to get paid? Are we going to have jobs? Is the school going to be here? Are we going to charterize and privatize? So the end of it is, and this is the horrible thing, what this temporary service, what going to Kelly Services now tells me, is that Teach for America won't even come in. I mean, think about that for a second. The fact that we're going to a temp agency for teachers. I got to wonder, and I got to find somebody who can answer some of these questions, because what does it now mean? Does it mean a guy who was sweeping the floor yesterday is now in front of the classroom? Does it mean a guy who was yesterday driving a forklift, hey, we're going to put you into, go teach third grade. Let's see how you do with that. Try your hat at teaching third grade. Wow. I mean, I'm literally without words. This is what we've allowed to happen. And it's the Stephen Blooms, it's the Auments, it's the Turzais, it's all of them. And a bunch of Democrats, too. I throw Anthony Williams in that as well. So time to get involved, time to get active, time to get angry. Just my thought. Anyway, if you missed any of the program today, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Honeywell has locked out 340 workers at its South Bend, Indiana plant rather than allowed them to continue to work while labor contract talks continue. UAW Local 9 President Adam Stevenson says the union was open to negotiating with Honeywell the whole time talks were going on, but when the workers rejected the latest Honeywell contract proposal, the company locked them out. The union is citing at least two issues in the company proposal they don't like: changes to their health care and the use of outside contractors. Honeywell claims its offer was competitive and comprehensive, but nothing but the company's own decision keeps it from allowing the union workers to keep working while they continue to talk with them about a new contract. Honeywell is trying to lock the workers out and keep the plant operating. The Chicago Teachers Union says it has a $502 million Chicago Public Schools revenue recovery package that Mayor Rahm Emanuel and the Chicago City Council should implement. CTU's Jackson Potter.
They've painted a picture where either teachers suffer draconian cuts in classrooms, either budget slashed, or Springfield comes to the rescue. And there's no other alternative besides those two pathways to the following school year. And what we've contended in our revenue package, our recovery package, is there are, in fact, alternatives, that they are misrepresenting reality. In the meantime, children shouldn't suffer. Chicago Public Schools shouldn't be handed over to private interests.
CTU and the district have been in negotiations for over a year on a new labor contract for teachers. The Chicago Teachers Union says the problems city public schools are facing revolve around the failure of leadership, the consistent, troubling disregard of community, parent, and educator voice, and the lack of equitable funding for Chicago schools. The United Food and Commercial Workers Union says it's had its 100th organizing win in 2016. UFCW President Mark Perrone says that a national conversation about wealth inequality is occurring in packing houses and on the floors of retail stores all over the country. He says UFCW has 100 examples of how those conversations are moving workers to form a union and take action. Perrone says workers are realizing that partnering with an established union can help secure the wages and benefits that put them on a path to a better life. The UFCW says workers in 26 out of 50 states have already joined this year, and over 50% of UFCW locals have had successful organizing drives.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
We will have so much winning if I get elected that you may get bored with winning. Believe me, I agree. You'll never get bored with winning. We never get bored. We are going to turn this country around. We are going to start winning big league.
Yes, winning bigly. There's part of me that goes, maybe a Trump presidency wouldn't be all that bad because all those made-up words that my kids come up with, maybe that'll be our language. Maybe we'll be making up new words every day. It will be hugely, amazingly, fabulously great. Oh, God help us. Big trouble on the horizon in my view. But I'm here to talk a little bit about the race as it is tightening up. And look, I know there are those who want to get into the Trump-Hillary thing. I'm still one holding out for the Bernie side. I've asked Bob Weiner, he is the president of Robert Weiner and Associates, to come talk with us. Also, he was one of the spokespeople during the Clinton years back in the 90s. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Today's news is astounding, Rick, in terms of the race tightening, where, for example, in Pennsylvania, Hillary's only up by 1, in Florida by 1, and Ohio down by 5 to this bigoted, misogynist babbler from his rear. It's amazing.
Yeah, but Bobby, he's talking like I do. He speaks my language.
He speaks big, and that's what people want. And, you know, Rick, Biden is right. We have to be aspirational. I got it. Hillary's going to win the nomination. I'm pro-Hillary. You know, I don't think we can win, to be honest, and to have a better country with someone who really can't pay for what he's putting out there. But that's beside the point. Hillary has got to be aspirational. She's got to think big, and she's got to talk in a way that's going to turn kids on, or they're going to stay home and we're going to lose.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Bob, and look, I've had the Hillary people come in and give that same kind of frame. Oh, he's got these big ideas he can't pay for. Well, you know, to have those big ideas, you figure out how to pay for it, because I don't remember a lot of people going, well, we can't pay for how to figure out how to build the bomb. We can't figure out how to pay for building an infrastructure. We can't figure out how to pay to get to the moon, for instance. But we did it, Bob. We had big ideas and big visions, and we figured it out. So to me, you know, the idea is just as important as the way to get there.
Absolutely right. Since when, Biden asked, have we become the party that can't think big? And, you know, Obama even made fun of it at the press dinner a week ago when he showed the cartoon of pushing the rock up the hill. That's not what we're supposed to be doing as a party. We're supposed to be at the top saying, here's how we got to get here.
Exactly. And, you know, the thing is and I think, and I hope Hillary's people understand this. They're smart people like you, very smart folks, who hopefully get that this is not about issues. This is about narrative and vision. This is about rolling up the sleeves and going, you know what? In 20 years, we're going to do something amazing. That excites people.
That's right. And she's got to do better at that. She can't keep making the point that you're not being realistic because we can't do it. Since when did we become the party of can't? You know, remember, yes, we can. So that's the issue. The other thing, Rick, is just what Trump's doing is outrageous, but she's got to fight back on the woman thing and talking about Bill Clinton's sex life. You know, this is a guy who's been married at least 3 times, maybe 4, and used 4 bankruptcies, and he included using the bankruptcies against his spouses to stop giving them money. It was in court.
Yeah.
A week before he went to court on his first wife. He said he's bankrupt, and then 3 days later he said we got tons of money. But in court he was saying how he didn't have the resources. He had bankruptcies. So this is a guy who totally abuses the law, and talk about somebody who abuses women. You know, the point that Hillary's got to make is she's had a single marriage and a highly successful daughter, and they're still together. And you, Donald, how many marriages have you had?
Yeah, well, but here's the thing: he's a man.
Therefore, what?
That's how our society views it. I don't agree with it. You don't agree with it. But sadly, the people who would vote for someone like Trump, that's how they think.
No, I think they support their wives. I don't think that's a fair statement, even conceptually. Even the ones who cheat support their wives and at least think that they shouldn't cheat. You know?
Okay.
I just don't think that's true.
All right.
I actually, if she fought back, you know, as saying, you know, how she's been victimized, and yet she went forward. She became Secretary of State. She became a senator, Secretary of State, and she's had a whole career, which he tries to say is nothing but the woman's card, from legal aid to the Watergate Committee. She's had a whole career of fighting for people, and going to China and saying human rights are women's rights. She's done amazing things through her career, and then, you know, it's because of her that Burma has a new party that really is on the verge of taking control, and the junta doesn't know what to do with Aung San Suu Kyi in Burma because of Hillary's work.
Yeah, nobody knows that, though,
Bob.
Bob.
She's done a lot. She's done an enormous amount. I don't think she does a good enough job of getting the credit for it.
No.
She did a ceasefire in the Middle East. I mean, I did a piece on that of the unrecognized work that she did on her ceasefire. She negotiated one, went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until they got sick of her and agreed. And she got it done, and she got a ceasefire done. You know, Kerry, by the way, you know, it's the Kerry people that are talking about, you know, how, you know, she really didn't keep to the policies on the emails and all that, even though Colin Powell and Condi Rice and everybody else had private emails. But, you know, there's some jealousy from Kerry and the Kerry staff, which is how some of this stuff is coming out. That's another story that hasn't happened yet.
Right. Well, I mean, it's amazing how Democrats seem to eat their own. And this is another example.
The jealousy of Kerry against anybody amazing.
Well, he can't say anything. He blew 2004. There's no reason he should have lost that.
Rick, I was in the parking lot with him when he first announced right as he was going to announce for president. I had worked in Massachusetts 30 years earlier for Lois Pines, who announced 3 months before he did for lieutenant governor, even though Kerry was a friend, but I didn't know he was going to run. But I gave my word to Lois Pines I was going to help her for lieutenant governor. And Kerry said to me, when I said to him, I'd really like to help him run for president, he said, well, you did work for Lois Pines. That was 30 years earlier. And after the race, I had a party at my house with a picture with him. That's how petty the guy is. We had a healing party picture at my house, that proves that we were supportive and friends and all that. I mean, I wanted to make it up to him, but that isn't what he remembered. He remembered you did work for Lois Pines.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you're dealing with people with huge egos.
That's right.
It doesn't matter. I don't care what office you hold. You're talking about people with huge egos.
Right.
So let me ask you this. Let's get back to the race, because today, West Virginia, Nebraska, obviously.
I think Hillary's going to lose.
Of course she's going to lose. In fact, I think she's going to lose 8 of the next 9 primaries that are popping up.
Well, she's starting to realize it, and she's putting some money in Kentucky, and she's starting to put some money into ads. I mean, she was taking them for granted, and now she's got to divert. That's one thing that Bernie isn't helping with. She's got to divert into fighting to make sure she has some credibility in this last round.
But at the end of the day, I mean, whatever Bernie's doing to her is nothing compared to what Trump is going to do this summer.
Right. And she's got to be big, bold, and fight back. She's got to point out, as you and I were talking, she's got to point out that the stuff he's talking about on womanizing, you are going to, she should say, you, above all, are going to talk about that with all the wives you've had and the bankruptcies that you've used to take away, to cheat your wives from alimony? You?
It's a good point. But what do you say to those, Bob, who say she should be above the fray and be presidential? Because this is just reality TV show kind of nonsense. Be better than that. Be presidential. What do you say to that argument?
I say, look at the 16 people that Trump nailed by them trying to be above the fray and be substantive and issue-driven.
Yeah, but look at those 16. Whoa, Bob, stop. Look at those 16. None of them, in my view, were anything close to presidential or on any of the issues. They are in a lower category than Hillary.
You don't think from the Republican side that Kasich or Rubio or any of those people, senators and governors, you don't think any of those guys?
I didn't. I honestly didn't.
I mean, obviously, I disagree with the philosophy of every one of them. Even Kasich pretending to be a liberal when he defunded Planned Parenthood and did the abortion stuff in his state and all of that. Every one of them was a right wing nut. But we can disagree. But in terms of their side of the fence, they had high politics people as senators and governors that he wiped out by being nasty.
So you're advocating for Hillary to roll up the sleeves and get equally deep into the mud.
Not the mud, but she's got to be substantive, like I said. You, Donald, with your 4 wives and your 4 bankruptcies and cheating your wives by using bankruptcies against them in court, and their court documents to show the dates of the before and after when you said you were bankrupt and then right after you said you're making tons of money. You, Donald, have the gall to accuse me when I have a one-marriage life and it's still going on, and it's still successful, and we have a highly successful daughter? You have the gall? I mean, who wins that argument?
And that's a good question. I mean, and that's something that at some point she's going to have to do. But at the end of the day, I get back to this narrative thing and exciting the base. Look, a lot of people that I know, okay, Hillary could probably be the nominee. I just don't see that kind of excitement, especially when you look at the younger generation. And you're somebody who's got some experience on how to rile up the younger generation. You were in charge of that at one point. Does she have the ability to rile up the Sanders folks that they'll come out?
That's an excellent question, and I hope our listeners will go to our piece of Politicians Need to Find a Way to Reach Millennials, which was just named the number 4 op-ed in the country. We had it in the New Jersey Herald, and it was named by Op-Ed News as number 4 in the country. Absolutely right. I was the youth vote director in 1972. That was a life-and-death situation, Rick, where the Vietnam War, and to this day I challenge anybody to say what was the reason we went in there and what were we accomplishing. I can't figure it out. Kids knew they were going to die for this non-defined reason war. And so we had a draft. we don't have that anymore. So there's no motive. There's no life and death of reason. And you remember our generation basically got Lyndon Johnson to withdraw from the race. And great, we got Richard Nixon as a result. But, so I'm not sure we knew what we were doing.
Right.
But we had some impact. We had enormous impact. And we had the highest vote turnout ever. 55% of young people voted. It hasn't been quite as close. Clinton or Obama, they were 52s, 53s, and so it's never been as high because we haven't had life and death. Now what you've got is you got student tuition. Well, Hillary's saying I'll reduce your loan by a few percent. Bernie's saying I'll give free public university colleges. That's
Right.
not everywhere else that kids go, by the way. That's just public university.
But here's the thing, Bob. We used to have something like that back in the day. I mean, I know people who paid very little to go through public schools.
We all did. I mean, it would cost next to nothing to go to college. I remember it. Now it's $50,000 to $60,000 a year, and it was $3,000 to $5,000 when I went to school. It was next to nothing.
Right.
And so I don't understand how we've allowed as a country. The reality is allowing the colleges to have that kind of a markup.
Well, I know how it happened. We created the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization by cutting tax rates so drastically
Absolutely.
that we had to shift the responsibility of paying for education onto those least able to afford it.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that all has to change, and that kind of big thinking is exactly what we have to do something about. But telling kids we're going to reduce your interest rates by a couple percent is not the answer.
Too technical.
It's got to be bigger than that.
So you're advocating for her to pick up some of, because Trump says he's going to pick up some of Bernie's rhetoric and some of Bernie's attacks on Hillary. She's going to have to pick up some of Bernie's talking points and some of his vision, right?
Absolutely right. And she's got to talk about the health big bill now is a step toward full national health insurance. And how I want to go there, she's got to say. I don't understand how you don't say that. The insurance companies have bought this thing right and left, and that's why the bill got compromised to go where it is, because we couldn't get 60 votes because of Baucus, a Democrat in the Senate, chairman of the Finance Committee, and he was bought and sold by the insurance industry, so we couldn't get the 60 votes.
Yeah, good old Max backdoor us. Yeah, I remember that well. But here's the thing. Let's say she does all that.
But he's not there anymore. So if we do pick up a landslide election, she's got to say that's a way that we can get to full national health insurance, that we can get to really dramatically reducing kids' costs in colleges.
Wow, you're optimistic. I'm not thinking
but
landslide.
But you got to at least think big and talk like you have a plan.
I got you, but I'm not seeing landslide. But okay, let's say it's a huge landslide. Do people buy what she's saying then when she says, I want national health care and I want all these things, when for years she's been saying she doesn't?
Well, actually, she was the creator of Hillary Care, which had the public option.
I remember.
And you remember that was part of the race. I did a piece on that. Hillary had the real health care plan. Obama had the one where he said he didn't want public option. He said that.
I know.
And then he was kind of willing to accept it when it passed the House, and then in the Senate, Baucus blocked it, and we didn't get it. So Obama was the compromise. People don't realize that Hillary was the liberal and Obama was the compromiser on health care. She wants it. And then as a backup, she did a CHIP plan and got 8 million kids free health care. So she did get something out of that. And there's some facts here that are useful.
Right.
No,
I'm with you. Look, I give her credit for that.
That yes, you made a point of the fact that Hillary had the real health plan in the original Obama-Hillary race.
I'm with you, and there's she's got to get that out. But at the
does.
end of the day, I think it's still got to be. She's going to have to roll up the sleeves and get into that fist fight because it's not going to be about it. I think Mark Cuban is right. It's not about issues.
But here's the other thing: it's way too early now, so you can't use your best ammunition now. Trump is kind of using the best stuff he's got. I mean, you can't go deeper and dirtier than going into Bill Clinton's sex life.
Oh, I think he's going
to. He's using his stuff now. There's no reason for Hillary to go there now.
Right.
Let her. You changed in the debates. You change the dynamic by 15 points when you have good sound bites. That's what happens in the debates. There's going to be 3 of them.
Oh yeah. I mean,
my counsel would not be to use your best stuff now. Now is a good time to put your platforms out, which is what she's doing. And she say, I'm not going to get into debating him. I'm going to put my platform, my substance, and the issues out. That's what she's saying. I think that, Rick, that's kind of the right strategy for this timing. And Trump may be making a fatal mistake by putting it all out there now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's who Trump is. The reality, in my view, is what comes to his mind comes out his mouth.
But he's not getting Hillary to drop out by attacking her. You know, he did that to everybody else, but the dynamic was in a Republican primary. They were withering. Hillary's not dropping out. She's the nominee, and so that's got to be held for the general election, and he's not doing it.
Yeah, well, we will see. And as it goes on, we're going to have you back to talk about that and all the other things to keep us informed as to the strategy, the ins, the outs, the moves, all of that stuff. Bob, always great talking with you.
You too, Rick. Great to be with you.
All righty, good stuff. You want to check out the website? We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Bob Wiener's name. Take you right there. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1869. At 2:47 p.m., a one-word telegram was sent from Promontory Summit, Utah. The message read simply, done. That understated message marked the end of one of the most incredible projects ever completed by working people in the United States, the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. The arduous work of laying the rail track across the continent was completed by a predominantly ethnic workforce. It has been estimated that workers swung hammers some 21 million times, laying the track along more than 1,100 miles. Irish workers performed the dangerous work for the Union Pacific Rail Company, building the track from the east. Chinese labor made up 3/4 of the Central Pacific crews constructing from the west. Laying the track through the Sierra Nevada mountain range meant blasting through solid granite. Chinese laborers used highly volatile nitroglycerin to make way for the railroad. On some days, the track progressed as little as just a few feet. The Central Pacific Company reported that 137 workers died on the project. Newspaper reporters claimed to have seen many, many more bodies of Chinese workers. The true death toll will never be known. Both the Irish and Chinese workers not only experienced brutal working conditions, but also had to deal with discrimination. The track also cut through territories of Native American land. The railroad encroached on this land and further accelerated the displacement of Native American people. When the final golden spike was driven into the track at Promontory Summit, the nation was forever changed. The trip across the continent, which previously would take up to 6 grueling months, had been reduced to just 2 weeks. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us at Labor History in 2.
I'm Edward James Olmos, and I'm here with my local letter carriers and store clerks from the United Food and Commercial Workers to remind you that Saturday, May 14th is the annual Stamp Out Hunger food drive. The reality of hunger in our communities is disturbing. 1 in 7 Americans does not have enough to eat. That includes seniors, children, even military veterans. But you can help in the fight against hunger, and it's easy. Just leave a bag of non-perishable food by your mailbox the morning of Saturday, May 14th, and your letter carrier will do the rest. All food collected goes directly to food banks and pantries in your community. Hunger in America is a real problem, but we can all be part of the solution. Saturday, May 14th, please join me, the National Association of Letter Carriers, and their partners, and stamp out hunger.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. So, in looking at retirement security, and there's been some interesting reports coming out the last couple of days, if you've been paying attention. that, look, the very well-to-do in the country doing well, very well-to-do. That's the reality. According to a Bloomberg report talking about a Government Accountability Office report that's described as the tale of two Americas. They look at the U.S. retirement landscape and say it's starting to look like a Charles Dickens novel. Evidently, since we have decided that the defined benefit retirement plan is bad, horrible, no good, and moved to these wonderful, fabulous, terrific 401ks, since we've gotten rid of the traditional pension plans that our grandparents, that were good enough for our grandparents' generation, that my grandmother collected from the time she retired in 1985 until she passed away this past April, every month, the check in the mail, every month to help support her. The savings didn't last quite that long. But the 401ks, here they are. And really, the story is pretty simple. For some, it's fabulous. For the highly paid workers, for the folks in the top, they're doing great. They're stashing as much as they can into 401ks and IRAs, and they're going to be fine. Thank you very much. For everyone else, not so much, especially for the 42% of workers in this country who have no access to work-sponsored retirement plans. So what we've got is we've got the luckiest being very lucky and, well, the unlucky not. In fact, the very lucky, their retirement savings is 11 times that of the, well, unlucky, outside of the ones who have nothing. But the new report from the Government Accountability Office points out that about 60% of all U.S. households have no savings in an IRA or a 401k. 60% of the country has nothing. They point out that the median retirement account balance by income group, people at the very top, the highest group, they've got over $200,000 in retirement savings. People in the second highest drops all the way down to 60. The second lowest down to 28, and people at the bottom quarter just over $10,000 in savings. In the working households where a person has a job and isn't self-employed, some 56% have at least a little money set aside, just a little bit, not much. For those in the second lowest quintile, only 50% have savings, the lowest down to just 25. So no real shocker. I mean, honestly, there's nothing really shocking about these numbers. Nothing there. People are struggling to make it to tomorrow. So 20 years from now is not something that folks have the luxury of thinking about. But when you stop and you think about how much people are going to be getting from their retirement savings, you look at people at the top, you're talking about, $6,400 a month in income from their pile of cash, down to the people who are looking at about $580. And to me, this is why Social Security is so important. If you don't have the savings to be able to live on, Social Security is supposed to be there as an anti-poverty program to make sure that people don't live in poverty. The sad thing and the crisis that we're heading to is, as I pointed out, 60% of the households have nothing. 20% of the people here are going to rely on just Social Security because they have nothing. 35% in the lowest income. So you look at all this stuff, and the reality is the inequality continues to soar. Inequality continues to get worse. And why? Well, quite simply, because we've created an economy that is great for the winners, but not so good for everyone else. And to me, you look at 2013, EPI did a study, and we've known this for a while. They did a study that said, look, the shift from traditional pensions to 401ks has been just an absolute disaster. Dean Baker, who we've had on this program numerous times, said, look, the retirement prospects are bleak. The disappearance of that defined benefit pension and the failure of 401ks to fill the gap have really left the next generation with nothing other than Social Security. And what's interesting, outside of that, is you hear all the people calling for, we need to privatize Social Security. Give it to Wall Street so they can steal it like they did the 401ks. Think about that for a second. Also, the Center for Effective Government, they came out with a report that showed that the 100 top Fortune 500 CEOs, their retirement assets totaled almost $5 billion, or about the same amount, held by 50 million families in this country, 41% of the entire country combined. Stop and think about that for a second. Do we have a problem? You bet we do. And in the next segment, we're going to talk about maybe how we turn that around, how we fix the crisis that we all know is coming. Quick break, right back. Stick around. So listen to The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour news update recorded on Tuesday, May 10th, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. The International Labour Organization has started a major initiative to study the future of employment with an emphasis on job loss. The ILO is the UN agency focused on matters of work in the world. It has been conducting a series of workshops on the issue of technological change and the future of work ahead of its annual conference of member states to be held in June. One of the researchers working with the ILO to study employment and tech change is Jayati Ghosh, a professor of economics at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi.
We need to distinguish between productive technological change and disruptive. Productive change is that which increases the productivity of human labor, and that's good because we do want to reduce drudgery. We do want to actually make things easier for people. We want human labor to be able to perform better. And we should think of ways of managing that change by taking the surpluses that are generated in those activities and using that in labor-intensive activities that improve human welfare. So in the care economy, in artistic and creative activities, in organic agriculture, in handicraft production, these are all things that will improve our quality of life. The other kind of technological change is disruptive. That is to say, the kinds of new technologies that enable changes in the organization of work and production and distribution. So what I am calling the Uberization of work, which is to say that technology enables companies to come up that are just aggregators. And therefore, workers are reduced to piece rate providers of goods or services. That's bad, because what that does is really reduce workers' bargaining power, make them bear all the costs and risks of production, and actually reduce their ability to demand from the employers the minimum worker protection. So I believe that the second kind of disruptive technological change is less desirable. And what we should be doing is thinking of ways to regulate that to make sure that workers don't lose out on basic protection.
Labor Start, the International Labour Movement's news and campaigning service, held a global conference of correspondents and union activists in Toronto, May 6th to 8th. Labor Start aggregates news about labor events and runs online petitions in support of union campaigns. More than 300 unionists from 17 countries participated in the Toronto conference. One of the participants at the Labor Start conference was Jim Eicher, the president of the British Columbia Teachers Federation. The BCTF represents some 40,000 teachers in Canada's most western province. A major issue at the Labor Start conference was the privatization of education around the world. I asked Mr. Eicher about the state of privatization in the educational sector of British Columbia.
Privatization of education around the world and in British Columbia, too, is a strong concern of ours. We have a number of private schools in British Columbia, and in this day of age of major public underfunding, we call it systemic underfunding by our Liberal government in British Columbia for the last 50 15 years. We've seen the growth and rise of private school funding, where our government now gives about $340 million to private schools, and we think that that money should be redirected to our public schools. We have no issue of parents choosing which school they want to, but it should not be subsidized by any public dollars.
Let me ask you about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. As you know, the TPP is a huge trade deal that has been negotiated by 12 countries representing about 40% of the world's GDP. What does the British Columbia Teachers Federation think of the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
We're not supportive of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and we're hoping that the federal government actually does not agree to this because of the implications not only for education, for teachers, but for British Columbia, working people, and our society as a whole. And we oppose it. We've opposed other free trade agreements.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Belanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Back to the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
When those Walmart guys hear the word unionize, they go completely insane. They'll find out who, and boy, if it's you, you're in for a world of pain. Yeah, I got friends with low wages. They work for Walmart in outrageously bad conditions, 'cause the union's missing.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Sue put it best. Got an email from Sue during the break. She put it best quite simply on our retirement crisis. Her comment is, we're screwed. Pretty much. And you look at these numbers by the Government Accountability Office in this report, and I don't know what other conclusion you come to than the working class of this country has been screwed, blued, tattooed, however you want to put it. And the question is, how do we come back from that? Which is why I've asked Christian Weller. He is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, also a professor of public policy there at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Christian, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Rick.
I figured, this topic, no other person in the country I'd rather talk to than the guy who actually wrote the book on this topic, Retirement on the Rocks, the name of it. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. But no other person, I think, to talk about this, because I look at these numbers, and scary as all can be.
It is scary, and it's gotten worse. Over the last 30 years, we've definitely lost a lot of ground. A lot of middle-class families who thought or previously were secure have fallen far behind, and I think the picture is often worse than the pure numbers suggest, because the money nowadays has to stretch further than in the past, because we no longer have pensions, so people have to make it stretch longer just in case they live to 100. They can't rely on the security of a pension. They have to manage all the risks associated with saving in a retirement account like a 401k. And that could mean that just as you're about to go into retirement, you lose 20% of the money you have in your account just because the market decides to tank at that point.
Yeah, 2008 happens again.
Yeah, and so those kinds of things sort of make the picture actually much worse than what you see from the Government Accountability Office or other estimates in terms of how much money people have put away, meaning we, at a time of rising risks, as the labor market has become less stable, as the stock market has become less stable, as the housing market goes through these massive ups and downs, we've pushed more of those risks, these massive increasing risks, onto the individuals. We said, okay, well, the seas are getting rougher, and now you have to figure out how to do this by yourself, even though in the past, when things were a little calmer, we had better Social Security and we had pensions.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when you say that the numbers, it's worse than the numbers. When I look at this number that says about 60% of all U.S. households have no savings in IRAs or 401ks, if it's worse than that, wow. I mean, it
is worse. And because while the sort of the retirement account, you got to remember, for most people, the retirement account, in quotation marks, is their house. And what people often don't realize until it's too late is that is an incredibly risky proposition. So if you live in suburbs of Atlanta or somewhere else where the housing crisis really struck hard, you often haven't come back from that.
Right.
So you might still be underwater on your house, meaning you owe more in a mortgage than your house is worth, and that is your retirement account. Because, as you said, only 60% of people have any money in a retirement account, and typically they have about $100,000 if they have one when they get to retirement, and $100,000 gets you maybe $1,000 a month or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the numbers, and what they were saying is, look, what's happened in this country is you're either doing really, really well. The highest quarter has something like 200,000 or some number that they threw out there, but the lowest folks like 10 grand, almost nothing, and they're saying there's a huge problem. So how do we fix that? Because it's my view, policy did this. We made a conscious choice to allow business to put all of our retirement into these Wall Street gimmicks. How do we come back from that?
You raise two issues. The first one is sort of the massive inequality, and the second one is sort of the role of the employers. And they're both policy-related problems. The first one is, let's go to the employers. We are in the United States have sort of said, okay, well, we give you a basic retirement benefit from Social Security, and anything beyond that is sort of a voluntary add-on. But we do know, as many middle-class working families, you're going to struggle figuring out what the options are and stuff like this. So we're going to give the employers some incentives to help you with that, to offer you retirement plans. The problem is employers have become more and more reluctant to offer any benefits. If they offer benefits, they tend to be 401ks, and employers have been cutting back on how much money they're contributing. When an employer offers a good retirement plan, it's wonderful, but very few, actually fewer and fewer do. Right. So the policy issue is, the policy problem is that we've relied too much on employers, and we need to go away from that.
I'm
There's
with you.
Alternative proposals. You could rely on churches, or you can rely on, this is sort of like where most of the retirement world right now is, make the states create retirement plans for private sector workers. Make it easier for people to save, make it easy, low cost for people, basically use the market power of a state like Pennsylvania to negotiate really good deals for people who do not have retirement savings. And then people will have low cost risk retirement savings. That's one thing. The other part, and this is sort of what often is overlooked, we give billions, hundreds of billions of dollars every single year in tax breaks for people to save for retirement. The bulk of that, more than 2/3, goes to high-income earners. It doesn't go to low-income people. So that's sort of what we need to do. We need to make the tax code work better for people.
I'm with you on that. And back to the states doing it, I've been arguing for years that the employers shouldn't be the ones taking care of retirement. That's not what they want to do. It's not what they should do. And I definitely don't want them having more and more control over our health care and our retirement. They've just shown that they can't or won't do it.
Often they don't want to. I mean, even if you're a good employer, even if you have a union, look, if you're a small manufacturer, you have other things to worry about.
Exactly.
Let's say you're in Central Pennsylvania and you're a manufacturer and you have to compete with Chinese manufacturing and you want to figure out how to export stuff to Europe. And how to make payroll and all of that. That's what you need to worry about, how to stay competitive. You don't want to deal with all of this other stuff. But that's exactly what our system is built around. It's like, well, not only do you need to figure out how to be a good manufacturer and a great exporter and be competitive and deal with everything else, you also need to now figure out how to deal with retirement benefits and make those work for your employees. And I understand to some degree why employers, yes, employers ultimately want to make a lot of money and often screw their workers, but also to some degree it's incredibly complex and there has to be something else. And the other thing, and this is sort of what we know from other countries, is essentially sort of states building up, it wouldn't be the states running it, but the states building up a retirement savings form outside of Social Security that works for a lot of people, that is portable, that's low cost, that's low risk. And there's lots of good proposals out there. California is moving in this direction. Connecticut is moving in this direction. Illinois is moving in this direction. And that stuff sort of has a lot of promise to make a real dent. But the other part is really, you look at the numbers, it's tremendous how much of our tax breaks goes to the top income earners. And that's sort of what drives a lot of this income inequality. That rich people who really don't need a lot of extra help saving get the biggest tax benefits, whereas a low-income person who pays payroll taxes but very little federal income taxes virtually gets no help from the tax code for, say, for retirement. And so the people who struggle the most get the least help. And that upside-down savings system in our tax code is incredibly wasteful and perpetuates and increases this inequality.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the people who have the money to lobby to get what they want, get what they want. I mean, it's that self-perpetuating system. But back to the employer part of this, and one of the questions I've always had...
But there are interesting proposals, actually bipartisan proposals, to at least start rectifying some of this problem and give more tax credits for low-income people, to use some extra money to help low-income people. So there is a recognition across the spectrum that what we have right now, it doesn't work.
So maybe there is some hope. But going back to the employer part of this, I've often wondered why it is we don't see the employer class saying we don't want to deal with health care. We don't want to deal with retirement. We don't want all of these external problems, because I see that there's like a holding on, like a grip onto it, like it's something that they feel that they want. Instead of going, look, let's move this to a more social system, make sure that let the state do it, let the federal government, let somebody do it, but I don't want to do it. That just seems...
Well, but the employers are often very ideological. On the one hand, sort of on a practical sense, they don't want to deal with it, but they do know that the alternative would be, to some degree, that the state steps in, either the federal government or a state government, and says, okay, well, now we're going to mandate that you have to do this, that you at least, at a minimum, have to offer your employees a payroll deduction into an individual retirement account, or something more than that you have to contribute something. And that's sort of where we're going. And again, there's lots of people left and right who are in favor of this. But employers often oppose to this from a purely ideological reason. Yes, they don't want to deal necessarily with the benefit, but they really don't want to have any mandates, even if it's just simply a payroll deduction mandate.
Interesting. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're Christian Weller, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, also a Professor of Public Policy at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and the author of Retirement on the Rocks. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can pick that up. So in going through some of this, what are the possibilities, given the complexities of this election cycle, that this becomes an issue that, maybe finally we start talking about?
That's a very interesting question. We actually, given how rapidly this crisis is coming to us, we're an aging society, and the share of people who are unprepared is, at this point, more than 50% of working-age households who are not prepared for retirement. And we're getting older and older, more important, more people going into retirement. And yet, you don't hear any candidate really talking about retirement, the retirement crisis. I would expect that once we get to the general election cycle, we will at least start talking about Social Security, and we'll talk about things like more caregiving help for people who are as they age, which is sort of a big drain on people's resources, which often means if they don't have enough savings, they have to move in with their kids to become a financial burden for their kids than that they hadn't planned for. So I would expect those kinds of topics, even retirement savings, smaller proposals, to become an issue during the general election campaign. I also expect wherever you have gubernatorial races where governors are up for election, and possibly mayors, that's where a lot of this retirement crisis talk happens. For a very simple reason. The states want to do something about it. There's about 28 states that want to do something on retirement savings because they see the federal government not acting. And the other part is, especially the cities and towns, they're at the forefront of the retirement crisis. If people don't have enough savings, the first place they're going to go to is their local agencies to ask for help, be that Meals on Wheels, be that fuel assistance, whatever. And that's typically a local burden. And so mayors and city councils are often acutely aware of the crisis and the growing demands on their budget. And I think that's how we're going to start talking about the retirement crisis in the country. It's not going to be a top-down, but it's going to be a bottom-up policy conversation.
Yeah, my fear is that it's too late by the time we start talking about it, though.
There's a lot of things we can do relatively quickly. Social Security changes can do a lot, even in a short run, and they can be temporary, as we did during the crisis. But there's a bunch of things we can do. Caregiving credit assistance proposals, sort of helping caregivers, family caregivers. You can deliver those benefits relatively quickly in a targeted way through Medicaid.
Right.
The federal government can give the states and the localities money. There's a bunch of things you can do relatively quickly. Yes, revamping the 401k system and making it work a lot better, and building up state savings initiatives, that's going to take time. But there's a bunch of things you can do relatively quickly, at least sort of to dampen the retirement crisis.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things that we can do. The question always is then, will we? And sadly, with the gridlock we have here in Harrisburg, what we see, the debacle in Washington, the question is will we do anything, or is this crisis just going to slap us in the face?
A rapidly rising, the fastest growing population, share of the population, people 65 and older, who are ill-prepared for retirement, and they're vocal, and they vote. So there's going to be a tipping point relatively soon where people will sort of knock on government's door, be that town hall, be that the state government, be that the federal government, saying, like, you got to do something about this. And I got to tell you, like, from a personal perspective, in sort of looking at this, it is going to come especially through the caregiving side as more and more people have to take responsibilities for family members who didn't have enough savings as they got older and require care. That's sort of one thing that we're going to see, and the press is already starting to write about it, and a number of policymakers are starting to talk about this, and I think that's one venue by which we're going to see more and more of this conversation happen.
It'll be interesting to see as it comes along. Christian, it was great talking with you. I appreciate the time. Don't be away too long like the last time.
Yeah, anytime.
Appreciate it. Christian Weller, Senior Fellow at Center for American Progress. Check out the book, Retirement on the Rocks. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Your proud defender of the working class majority, Rick Smith.
Coal mining is a filthy business. Literally, miners not only get covered in the soot of their trade, but also suffer the suffocating death called black lung. The industry explodes mountaintops, contaminates mountain streams and drinking water, and causes both acid rain and climate change. Then there are the murders. Oh, they're not called murders, but intentionally sending workers 1,000 feet underground into poorly ventilated tunnels filled with explosive methane gas and coal dust without providing proven safety equipment amounts to signing a murder contract with the Lord of the Underground. That's what Don Blankenship did as CEO of Massey Energy. Recklessly pushing profits over safety, he oversaw the corporate murder of 29 West Virginia miners in the predictable horror of an enormously violent detonation deep inside Massey's Upper Big Branch mine in 2010. Now, at long last, Boss Blankenship has been convicted and sentenced in federal court. Not for murder, though. Under our nation's feeble Mine Safety Act, killing 29 miners is a misdemeanor, and the punishment handed down to this multimillionaire corporate crime boss was merely 1 year in jail and a $250,000 fine. Such soft-on-crime leniency is not the fault of the jury or judge. They did the most with what the law allows for punishing industrial criminals. In fact, Blankenship is the first mining CEO ever convicted of conspiring to violate safety protections for miners. Rather, our corrupt, corporate-serving Congress critters are to blame. Key lawmakers have taken millions of dollars in campaign donations from barons like Blankenship in exchange for reducing corporate murder to a misdemeanor. This is Jim Hightower saying, the filthiest thing about big coal is its immoral use of filthy political money to let its bosses literally get away with murder.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown.
You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Here's a surprise. A refugee deal between the EU and Turkey is not working as planned. That according to 3 members of the European Parliament who recently visited Turkey and Greece. According to the terms of a recent deal, Turkey is to take back asylum seekers who tried to reach Greece and then process their asylum paperwork. In order to allow vulnerable asylum seekers to be sent to Turkey, the EU had to essentially lower its standards for what constitutes a safe country, and Turkey promised to treat asylum seekers well and quickly review their paperwork. Well, the parliamentarians claim that isn't happening. After conducting interviews at a Turkish asylum camp, they said asylum seekers had not received information about the status of their paperwork and were being denied legal counsel. Turkey claims it's doing nothing wrong, but if there are already concerns about refugee treatment after several hundred asylum seekers have been transferred, imagine when that figure is in the tens of thousands.
Russia. Large, endless, and amazing.
And go east, young man. The Russian government is extending an offer to its citizens to start a new life in the country's remote Far East. A scheme announced by Vladimir Putin will grant 2.5 acres to every Russian who moves to the sparsely populated region and builds a house or a farm. If enough Russians take up that offer, the hope is that the less developed area will begin to modernize. And there's also a geopolitical concern in trying to fill up the East. There are far more Chinese migrant workers living there than Russians, and most of them are there to harvest natural resources. Populating the region with more Russians is seen as a hedge against expanding Chinese influence in an area China could one day want for itself. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. You know, in talking with Christian, you look at those numbers with the retirement crisis that's coming up and really the unequal balance in the account books from those at the very top to those at the very bottom. It's not surprising. You look at what's going on Wall Street. Executives like Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan Chase, $27 million in salary last year alone. And that's nothing compared to what we're seeing. Nothing compared to what we're seeing with these hedge fund managers. Evidently, the top 25 hedge fund managers last year cashed in at almost $13 billion. Kenneth C. Griffin topped the list, $1.7 billion. And yet, you know, most of that money paid tax on the capital gains rate, much lower than most truck drivers or electricians or somebody out there in the heat swinging a hammer or putting a roof on my house. That is just flat ridiculous. It's wrong. And from a policy standpoint, I think Christian Weller pointed this out. We chose the 401k. Our policy leaders decided this was going to be the best thing. We need to have, all going to be millionaires. And like I said earlier, you know, I was told when I first started one of my jobs, you work here 30 years, kid, you'll have $1 million. And I'm going, there's just no way that's going to happen. There's no way that the powers to be are going to allow it. And it's not happening. And it's not happening for millions of people in this country, let alone the millions who don't have it. So I think Christian's right. We need to be moving towards policy. And maybe this election season is the time when we're going to start talking about how we get some retirement security. I mean, countries around the world have got to be laughing at us that really we have a society so unequal, a society where so many people are at the margins. And look, we're supposed to be the richest country in the world. The fact that we've got kids who go to bed hungry, we've got veterans who live on the street, and we got seniors cutting pills in half because they have to decide between cat food and pills. There's something wrong there. And what I'm looking at in our election cycle, nobody's really talking about how do we fix those problems except really Bernie Sanders. And which is why just very interesting to me. So in the next hour, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on around the world. How does the rest of the world look at us? We're going to talk with a guy who is he's the odds maker on everything, I guess, on everything politics. He's laying the line on our presidential race. You want to check out the website during the break, politicalgambler.com. We'll get a link at the ricksmithshow.com. And Paul Cristomarti is going to be here talking about what are the odds, who's going to win, where should we be placing our money if we were allowed to bet on those, and also what do the people in the UK view, what are they thinking when they see the Donald, when they see the Orange Man? What are they thinking when they see Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton? And really, is there a tow truck driver in their country who would leave someone stranded on the side of the road because of a political bumper sticker? Really? Well, we're going to find out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Honeywell has locked out 340 workers at its South Bend, Indiana plant rather than allowed them to continue to work while labor contract talks continue. UAW Local 9 President Adam Stevenson says the union was open to negotiating with Honeywell the whole time talks were going on, but when the workers rejected the latest Honeywell contract proposal, the company locked them out. The union is citing at least two issues in the company proposal they don't like: changes to their health care and the use of outside contractors. Honeywell claims its offer was competitive and comprehensive, but nothing but the company's own decision keeps it from allowing the union workers to keep working while they continue to talk with them about a new contract. Honeywell is trying to lock the workers out and keep the plant operating. The Chicago Teachers Union says it has a $502 million Chicago Public Schools revenue recovery package that Mayor Rahm Emanuel and the Chicago City Council should implement. CTU's Jackson Potter.
They've painted a picture where either teachers suffer draconian cuts in classrooms, either budgets slashed, or Springfield comes to the rescue. And there's no other alternative besides those two pathways to the following school year. And what we've contended in our revenue package, our recovery package, is there are, in fact, alternatives, that they are misrepresenting reality. In the meantime, children shouldn't suffer. Chicago Public Schools shouldn't be handed over to private interests.
CTU and the district have been in negotiations for over a year on a new labor contract for teachers. The Chicago Teachers Union says the problems city public schools are facing revolve around the failure of leadership, the consistent, troubling disregard of community, parent, and educator voice, and the lack of equitable funding for Chicago schools. The United Food and Commercial Workers Union says it's had its 100th organizing win in 2016. UFCW President Mark Perrone says that a national conversation about wealth inequality is occurring in packing houses and on the floors of retail stores all over the country. He says UFCW has 100 examples of how those conversations are moving workers to form a union and take action. Perrone says workers are realizing that partnering with an established union can help secure the wages and benefits that put them on a path to a better life. The UFCW says workers in 26 out of 50 states have already joined this year, and over 50% of UFCW locals have had successful organizing drives.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers power professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Your proud defender of the working class majority, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. What if you could gamble? What if you could bet on the presidential election? What if you could bet on who's going to be our next president? Would that make it more interesting, less? What would it be harmful to our democracy? Would it rip out our soul? Would it end the world? Well, I got to tell you, I think it might help solve our national debt. That could be one thing. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about somebody who can and does. He is a political gambler. That's why I've asked Paul Krishmanerdi to come and talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the UK and maybe what the lines are and what the odds are on our presidential race. Paul, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
So you're a political gambler, huh?
Yeah, I'm a professional gambler. I bet on sports mostly, but politics is another big market for me, and this particular election has been a huge event for me for months.
Yeah, I look at it, and I got to be honest, I'm not surprised because I've been saying our politics have been turning into team sports, so it just seems like the natural evolution of taking it to just like sports gambling.
Well, let's be honest, the Republican nomination was a horse race, wasn't
it? Was beautiful.
Or a cage fight, or something like that. It didn't seem like politics as usual, did it?
No, it absolutely didn't. I mean, we were down in the primordial ooze, if you will. But and look, 2012 was great. It was fun. This one was just kind of mean. So, as the odds man there, as the guy who's making the line or gambling on this stuff, did you pick Trump? Did you guys see him coming?
No, not at all. Not at all. I didn't back him. I made money out of it because I trade politics. In other words, I buy and sell candidates if they were as if I was playing the stock market because the odds move up and down. And I made money out of predicting Ted Cruz very early on when he was a big outsider and opposing Jeb Bush, but I never called Trump right.
Yeah, everybody who knew anything knew Jeb, ! Was not going to be the guy, especially after people learned that JebBush.com was actually owned by Donald Trump. Which I thought was, you can check it. Go to JebBush.com. It'll go right to Trump's page. So, nobody saw that in the UK either. So, I guess you just didn't think that kind of nothing would sell here?
Sorry, can you say that again? I didn't quite hear that.
That somebody who has nothing really substantively politically to say, that he's got nothing to say, that he could win?
Well, that's the point. I mean, I did predict that an outsider would win the Republican nomination because I could see that was the mood in the camp.
Right.
But I didn't think that a reality TV star that, as you say, didn't really have anything substantial to say about politics and seemed to be playing just a publicity game could actually have the legs to win this thing. But, he's rewritten the rules, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the Democratic side, did you pick that side? Did you see Sanders doing as well as he has done? What were your thoughts on that side?
I could always see Sanders doing well and, capturing a large segment of the vote. But I've always felt Clinton would win because she had greater nationwide appeal. She was always going to win easily in the South.
Okay, so not much surprise there for you. Now,
of course, the Clinton machine is a feared thing. I mean, in my opinion, at the start, Joe Biden should have run. Joe Biden is the most electable Democrat candidate.
Yeah, I wanted Joe Biden to run as well. But personally, I'm a Sanders guy.
Because I think he feared the Clinton machine. He just thought this isn't winnable.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting look at it. Now, coming November, I'm sure you're beginning to lay the odds of what November might look like. Any early predictions for us?
Absolutely. Right, so the Betty market prediction at the moment makes it a 70% chance that Clinton will win and a 23% chance that anyone else will win.
Wow.
That Trump will win. And you'll note that doesn't add up to 100. So people aren't even 100% sure that Trump will be the candidate yet, I don't think, or Clinton. But the Democrats are overwhelming favourites, like 75% the Democrat candidate between them.
Wow. I got to tell you.
I'd be very surprised if the Democrat candidate doesn't win it.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm not that sure. To be honest, I'm afraid of the mindset of the country, especially as you've pointed out that no one politically on the gambler side thought that Trump would do as well, even though I said be afraid of him because, it kind of shows where we are as a country. So I'm a little fearful of because if you go back to 1980 and you remember the Carter-Reagan race, the Carter people wanted Reagan because Reagan was the crank at the time. He was the crazy guy. He was the outsider, and Reagan won. And that scares me that we could be reliving history.
I don't personally think Reagan and Trump are really comparable. Reagan was a serious politician. He'd been governor of California. Trump really is like nothing else, and I think that the scrutiny will destroy him. And I think, more to the point, where he starts right now is in the worst position, polling-wise, of any presidential candidate, certainly in my lifetime, at this stage.
Yeah, his unfavorables are through the roof.
Forefront of American public life for a long time, as Hillary Clinton. So I think most people have made up their minds, and I think that there's a substantial majority in America that's vehemently opposed to Donald Trump.
Well, I'm hoping you are correct. But what do the rest of the folks, what do your friends and people there in the UK think of this cycle? What do they think of someone like Trump?
Well, Trump is deeply unpopular in the UK. I'm not going to say nobody agrees with him because, we also have issues over immigration and such forth. But I would say that people in this country actually generally seem to be quite scared of a Trump presidency. The idea that he was in charge of the free world, if you like, that he was in charge of the world's only superpower. And I think they've also just been bemused because, as we say, it's an incredible thing that's happened. And we don't have that culture in the UK. We don't really have the culture of a celebrity or an actor getting involved in politics. If a celebrity or an actor speaks about politics, people are just generally very cynical, but they're doing it for self-publicity.
Right.
So, Trump was never taken seriously, but suddenly everyone's like, wow, he's won, and now what?
Yeah, I had hoped we were like that. I had hoped we would, when you hear a celebrity speak about politics, you go, okay, yeah, go ahead, next. But he really, by saying virtually nothing, other than attacking with the little Teds and the guy with no energy and jab and all of the attacks that he made, he's got himself to the top rung.
I think there's a dynamic in play here, though, with the nature of the race. When they had 10 people on the stage, or 17 to choose from, nobody else got a look in. The media cannot help but buy into Trump. It's good for ratings. It's newsworthy. He tweets, and it's front-page news. And it squeezed everyone else out, and it turned the race into Trump or not Trump, and then people were undecided, and by the time that it had got down to a two-runner race, a whole lot of people didn't like Ted Cruz either, so you had, Trump had stolen the march on them. I think in a two-runner race against Clinton, or against anyone, I don't think Clinton's a particularly strong candidate. I think he'll lose, because I think that he's toxic to far more people than he isn't.
Right. So is this your personal opinion, or is this where the money's at? Is this where the gambling bucks are behind?
Absolutely, it's both. It's both. I mean, she's the strongest favourite there's ever been at this stage of a presidential contest.
Interesting. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Paul Namerty. His website, politicalgambler.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Paul's name. Looking at the VP, are there any lines on who maybe either Hillary or the Donald chooses as their number two?
There is, yeah. I'm getting into this now. It's not an easy thing to bet on. We do have lines on it, but there's nowhere near the interest, so it's not as easy to place a bet. Now, I've already had my first positions were to oppose, to get against John Kasich and Ben Carson. I don't think there'll be anyone who was in the race. But the only actual bet I've placed on, well, my pick, is I've had a little bet on Joni Ernst from Iowa.
Bread bags? Sure.
33-1. I think she's plausible. For the Democrats, I haven't had a bet yet. The two people I like are Tim Kaine, Virginia, and Tom Perez, former Labour Secretary.
Tom Perez. I've thought Perez, but then I went with Julian Castro. If I were betting, that's where I would have thought of going until he made that stupid comment about stop demonizing Wall Street.
Right. He's the favourite, Julian Castro.
Yeah, I mean, because he's a good-looking Hispanic guy, and that's gonna help Hillary a little bit. But I don't know that you really need the Hispanic vote this election, because you've got Trump on the other side.
Well, exactly. That's the calculation, I think, with Castro, that Clinton's got the Hispanic vote sewn up. Yeah. You'll probably see a bigger Hispanic turnout than ever before, and it'll be more pro-Democrat than ever before. Whereas, say, Tim Kaine could deliver a key swing state in Virginia.
You hope so. I mean, the governor there is doing everything he can to make sure that happens. But going through all this kind of makes me go, I wish I lived in the UK. You could lay some money down. This could get you into a lot of trouble, though, couldn't it?
No, I don't think it's illegal for UK citizens to bet on America. There's no problem with UK citizens betting when they're in America via their UK account. It's the issue that Americans aren't allowed to open accounts or log on to gambling websites.
Now, can you gamble on UK elections?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's huge. And we've got a load of things at the moment because we've got the European Union referendum coming up next month. So that's going to be a really big betting heat. And we bet on who's going to be the next party leaders. That's all getting exciting because David Cameron won't be there the next election.
Wow. I mean, I like getting involved in campaigns personally, but I think that would add the next level of excitement. And maybe here in our country, we could figure out how to, maybe solve some of our budget deficits.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, it's a niche expertise. It's the mathematical side of it, obviously, and the trading side of it. But I think it's also that and the deep interest in politics. I think most people who had a really deep interest in politics would be very good at picking next leaders and presidential candidates and all that, because you see them coming through, these up and coming stars.
Yeah. So how did you get involved in this? How did you pick this little niche up?
Well, so I was a gambler from a very young age. I was around the betting industry from a teenager, and so I was very, very heavily involved. I was always like a semi-professional gambler. Then I went to university and I studied politics because that was my passion. And as soon as I came out of university, there was a British election, 2001, and I suddenly realised that I could merge my two skills to make a lot of money.
Wow.
So
and you do well, right? And you do well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've made a living as a professional gambler for 13 years. And politics-wise, I've never had a losing election.
Wow, maybe we should get you to call our elections.
This one's going well so far.
Good for you. It sounds like great stuff. Last question I've got for you, though. I don't know if you saw the story here in the States. In South Carolina, there was a tow truck driver showed up at a disabled woman's disabled vehicle on the side of the highway, and he noticed she had a Bernie Sanders bumper sticker on her car, and he left her there stranded. Said that something like God told him to leave and that he wasn't dealing with those kind of people. Could something like that possibly happen in your country?
You'd like to say no. I'd like to say no, but at the same time, a lot of forces that have driven America apart politically, I think, are in play in the UK as well. And we've had a lot of austerity measures, and, the poor are very much demonised, by politicians. And it wouldn't shock me. And again, there's a lot of vitriol. I think most people in the UK, very much like America, they vote on a negative. Most people in Britain would never vote Conservative or never vote Labour. And then all these other parties come in.
So we're almost the same then. We've polarized to the point
where... and there's a lot of ideological consistency, I think.
There you go.
Between the UK and America. America tends to be 5 years ahead. You had Clinton, and then Tony Blair came in with exactly the same program. America had George W. Bush. We have David Cameron with a very, very similar program.
Does that mean you're going to have a Donald Trump in 5 years?
Well, who knows? Who knows? We are headed. Clearly, Trump shows you we're living in a very, very different world where people don't trust politicians. They don't automatically, tribally support political parties. And then they worship celebrity. And we're no longer slaves to one particular media because we've got social media. And somebody, you just don't know. Somebody could catch the public mood.
It will be interesting to see, and that's why we play the game, and that's why I like talking about Paul. It was great talking with you. I suggest people go check out the website, politicalgambler.com, if you want more information. Paul, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day that as many as 90,000 people rallied for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment in Grant Park in Chicago, Illinois. The proposed amendment to the Constitution read, "Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." The idea to amend the Constitution to ensure equal rights for women was first proposed by Alice Paul in 1923. In the late 1960s, with the second wave feminist movement, the push for the amendment gained momentum. At the time, women only made 59 cents for each dollar earned by men. Not all labor leaders supported the Equal Rights Amendment. Some worried that the proposed constitutional amendment would nullify existing labor protections for women in the workforce. They instead advocated for legislation around specific issues faced by women. Myra K. Wolfgang, a vice president of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees and Bartenders International Union, testified against the ERA before the Senate in 1970. The ERA passed Congress in 1972, but in order for the amendment to go into effect, 38 states had to ratify it. 30 quickly did so, but then a backlash against the legislation began to gain momentum. Illinois was the only northern state that was a holdout for ratifying the amendment. A massive rally was planned. That morning, the Chicago Tribune described the crowd that was expected, including representatives from labor, religion, show business, politics, and the home. Despite this massive turnout, the Equal Rights Amendment failed to win enough support in Illinois. The amendment fell 3 states short of becoming the law of the land. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I'm Edward James Olmos, and I'm here with my local letter carriers and store clerks from the United Food and Commercial Workers to remind you that Saturday, May 14th is the annual Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. The reality of hunger in our communities is disturbing. 1 in 7 Americans does not have enough to eat. That includes seniors, children, even military veterans. But you can help in the fight against hunger, and it's easy. Just leave a bag of non-perishable food by your mailbox the morning of Saturday, May 14th, and your letter carrier will do the rest. All food collected goes directly to food banks and pantries in your community. Hunger in America is a real problem, but we can all be part of the solution. Saturday, May 14th, please join me, the National Association of Letter Carriers, and their partners, and stamp out hunger.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Just a day job that someone's got to do. It's kinda hard when everyone looks up to you. Try to make it look easy, gonna make it look good, like anybody but. I'm just your average, ordinary, everyday superhero.
So Tony sent me an email. He says, Rick, great report from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Seems this election year is even harming kids in school, unlike other years. He writes, an increase in polarization, intimidation, bullying, especially towards minorities, thanks to the never-ending news cycle, hate radio, and television. He says there always were fringe/nutty candidates, but they were never given a podium or taken seriously. I don't remember anything like this in my lifetime. I really hope this election goes for the people or else. the rest of us will be in a great deal of hurt. And Tony, you're right. There are a lot of things that those of us who commentate on this stuff really kind of, wow. I was expecting worse than 2012. I was expecting a knockdown, drag out, kind of mean, nasty affair. Not this. And I think Trump has taken this down to a level that I don't know that anybody really foresaw. And I think it's because I don't think anybody foresaw that we would be the country that would accept this. And that's what's kind of scary to me. That, I had thought the Republican Party was, where they mean, nasty, divisive, all of those things, xenophobic, racist, those kind of things. Just didn't know it was down to that level. And that's what's scary. And I think it's going to say a lot about our country come November, because there are those who are saying, oh, huge landslide. I don't know. And I'm not going to be the one that jumps on the landslide bandwagon at all. And I look at this report that came out of West Virginia. A guy named Richard Ojeda, he decided he was going to run for the West Virginia State Senate against a Democratic incumbent. And, he was doing the glad handing, going out to the parties and, doing the campaigning. Evidently, he was at an event, some barbecue that they had about 60 miles southwest of Charleston, when one of the people there, a guy named Jonathan Stewart Porter, asked for a bumper sticker. And the candidate, Richard Ojeda, said, okay, I'll put it on. Where do you want it? He puts it on the rear of the bumper, the truck. And then this Porter guy says, hey, I want one on the front too. So as this guy goes to put the bumper sticker on, as Ojeda puts the bumper sticker on, this Porter guy just starts pummeling him, beating him maliciously, beating him really unconscious. And the reports that you saw is the guy was basically woke up with his head on a stump, bleeding and spitting out blood. And the guy who did the beating, this Porter, got into the truck, and reports were they were going to run him over. Reports were that, and they put those ATVs in front of this guy who's laying on the ground, unconscious, bleeding. They put these ATVs in front of him so that this guy who beat him couldn't run him over. He ran over and smashed up, I guess, the ATVs pretty well, but didn't get to the guy, an Iraq War veteran. And this guy's now saying, look, this is because I'm running a political campaign. He's saying that at the end of this is politically motivated, that this is been going on. He claims he's been getting death threats. He's had people call his house, say they're going to cut his head off. They've cut the wires to his house. They've ripped the phone lines out. They've done all kinds of things to silence this guy. And as he says, look, the moment you start asking questions, you become public enemy number one. He says, I'm challenging the powers to be. And look, this is what scares me. That eventually you cannot have. I've gotten into situations where you can't have a political conversation with somebody because they are incapable of having a discussion and a debate. We've lost the ability to converse. We now shout at each other. And me personally, I love having the back and forth. Tell me what you think. I'll tell you what I think, and we'll bang it around. Not that either one of us can change the world by ourselves, but having that back and forth to me is engaging. It's energizing. It's worth the discourse as long as it's done in a way that you're not pummeling somebody because they differ from you. My fear with this mass polarization, the thing that bothers me is that we've been trained as a society through mediums like this program to just shout at each other. And what I encourage my listeners to do, take what I tell you, investigate it, learn it, understand it, and begin to talk to your friends and neighbors and the right-wing crank Fox News viewer uncle that you've got and explain to him where he's fallen down on the job. Have those conversations. And look, if they're right, give them credit for being right. But be able to be challenged, be able to have a conversation. What is it about us? Where are we going when we can't do that? And I look at this. This guy was pummeled. I mean, the pictures they showed of, he's going to have facial reconstruction surgery because he had the audacity to decide that he was going to get involved in his political process. Really? Now, some are saying, well, that's just Logan County, West Virginia. They've always had that down there. Well, yeah. When the coal barons run everything, yeah. I mean, almost heaven, not so much. For this guy, it's almost hell. The reality is, until we wake up and realize that the moneyed interests are not our interests, the moment we stop thinking about class consciousness, the moment we stop thinking about each other, is the time where we get this scary stuff to come up. And you go back to the railroad magnate, Jay Gould, I could easily pay half the working class to kill the other half. This, another one of those examples. Sad stuff. I hope he does. He's out of the hospital today because he's out campaigning. Going to go right back after today's primary in West Virginia. One of the races in West Virginia I'll be watching, by the way. I hope he wins. I don't know what his platform is, but you take a beating. I got to tell you, I'm hoping for him. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
As the wildfire burns into a second week, it looks set to become the costliest natural disaster in Canada's history.
Cooler weather slows growth of Canada's catastrophic oil sands region fire. U.S. officials warn the western snowpack is melting at record speed. Mobil Oil's CEO tried to warn of climate change back in 1982. Plus,
I do think that there's a lot more room for agreement on climate change between conservatives and liberals than is often made out in the media.
More Republicans accept climate change than ever before.
Yeah, we'll see. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
2014 was the warmest year ever. Until 2015 became the warmest year ever. Now 2016 might turn out to be even warmer than either of those. You know what climate change is real? When the hottest year on record is whatever year it currently is.
Ooh, Jimmy Kimmel said that on ABC television. He gonna get in trouble. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, the pictures coming in from Fort McMurray up there in Alberta, Canada, continue to be jaw-dropping. The devastation for miles is just incredible.
Yes, luckily cooler temperatures and light rain have slowed the growth of the fire, but officials say that it could be months before that fire is entirely extinguished. Officials estimate some 2,400 structures have been destroyed. That's according to the latest count. The fire already ranks as one of the worst natural disasters in Canada's history, with preliminary estimates of economic losses estimated to be as much as $9 billion, not just from insurance losses, but also the hit to Alberta's economy from having to curb tar sands oil production, from which Alberta gets a significant portion of its revenue.
And it would be irresponsible if we did not point out that the fire right smack dab in the middle of Canada's tar sands oil region is because of the extraordinarily hot and dry weather that is directly tied to climate change.
And scientists say the wildfire problem will continue to get worse as the planet warms. Wildfire season is already now 2 months longer than it was back in the 1970s. Here in the U.S., the Federal Natural Resources Conservation Service is warning of another intense fire season here, announcing over the weekend that in the western United States, the snowpack that had built up because of El Nino is already rapidly melting out at, quote, record speed. From Alaska to Washington to Wyoming, the service says snowpack is melting so quickly that flooding is a possibility in some areas in the short term, and warning that in the long term, intense wildfires will follow this summer summer as the forests dry out earlier.
And that's also bad news for those of us out here in the West amidst this historic drought in Southern California and elsewhere in the West.
Meanwhile, in politics,
global warming and that, a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.
Presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump has said that climate change is a hoax, but a new poll shows he's out of step with a growing majority of Republican voters. According to a new survey from Yale and George Mason universities, 47% of conservative Republicans now believe that global warming is happening. That's a 19 percentage point jump in just the last 2 years. The survey found 2/3 of American voters support funding research into renewable energy and policies to cut emissions. But the researchers also found that most of those surveyed don't know about the overwhelming consensus on climate change among the world's scientists. That's including Democrats. Less than 20% are aware that 97% of climate scientists agree climate change is man-made. That could be helped if we talked about it more, according to CNN environment columnist John Sutter in an interview on the broadcast.
A pretty large majority of Americans never discuss global warming, or almost never discuss it. One important message that we've gotten from, these ongoing surveys is that we need to talk about this more, and we need to talk about it not just on the news, but, with each other, at family dinners, that sort of thing. I mean, it sounds hokey, but I think that really is the way that you start to open up these conversations.
Another way to open up these conversations, as I mentioned to John Sutter when I interviewed him, is if CNN itself was talking about it more. Yeah, he's talking about it on the website, but on air, good luck finding conversation about climate change on CNN.
Finally, new evidence has emerged that Exxon isn't the only oil company that knew burning fossil fuels would cause global warming decades ago, even as it denied it publicly. According to a new report from Inside Climate News, back in 1982, just as the oil industry was beginning to exploit oil deposits like Canada's tar sands in Alberta, the chief executive of Mobil Oil wrote a published essay warning that burning the tar sands could accelerate dangerous global warming. He said he hoped that federal scientists would figure out a solution. Mobil Oil was later bought by Exxon.
Yeah, just let the federal government deal with it. They'll figure it out. Same people who hate the federal government. Imagine that. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The more you ignore me, the closer I get. You're wasting your time.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I got news for you, and it's going down.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Lots going on around the globe. That's why we've got Luke Vargas, Talk Media News Service. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, it's a pleasure.
What's going on? I understand the president's going to Hiroshima.
Yes, he is. And this is not just a decision they've made lightly. The president has gone, I think, to Japan 3 times in his presidency. And each of those occasions, the White House was pressed to answer questions from the press corps. Are you going to go to Hiroshima? Are you going to go to Nagasaki? And each time they basically said no. They didn't dismiss the question. They said, we thought about it. We weighed the positives and the negatives of these trips, and we've decided against it. So for that decision to be made now, I think is quite important. Tellingly, the White House accompanied the announcement of this trip with a number of statements which said, we're not apologizing by going to the city. We are not reopening the discussion about whether or not it was right to drop weapons on that city 70-some years ago. But nonetheless, as can be expected, the conservative press, the president's critics and detractors are already hot on this and equating this to the 2009 apology tour when, if you'll remember, the president went to France. He said, we haven't been the best ally. Over the last 10 years, he went to the Middle East, to Cairo, and he said, look, we've made a few mistakes. We haven't been perfect in the Middle East. And, the conservative press just, they went crazy over that.
Yeah. When I saw this, you expect it. We're weak. You expect all of that nonsense. And look, I'm not going to have the conversation whether it was the right or the wrong thing to do. It's history. It's over with. It's done. I don't think him visiting there has anything to do with apologizing or being weak or any of that stuff. I do think it's interesting that he's doing a lot of things that are the firsts, and that's a good thing in my view.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the chief arguments being made in favor of this. And I have two positive takes on this, two negative. And I think the negatives are interesting, but we'll get to them in a second. The positives are just what you mentioned. The Japanese prime minister came to Washington last year. He laid a wreath at the World War II Memorial. He spoke in front of Congress and praised the heroism of U.S. Men and women in the armed forces during World War II. The Japanese government said that was his way of sort of trying to put the past behind the two countries and strengthen the alliance. It could be interpreted that the president going to Hiroshima would do the same, even if he doesn't apologize. There's another argument here that the United Nations is making where they would love to see someone like President Obama speak out about nuclear disarmament, and that going to Hiroshima and just talking about the danger of nuclear weapons in the world and the fact that we need to reduce stockpiles and move towards a nuclear-free planet is important. I mean, that's a great once-in-a-generation type opportunity. And so those are, I think, two very clear reasons in favor of this trip. There are, though, I think, some potential pitfalls of a visit like this. One of them is sort of a regional security implication, which is that, namely, South Korea and China have been very critical of Japan for decades, saying that Japan uses this victimhood narrative. They're always looking for people to come and, honor all of the innocent people killed in these nuclear attacks and, if not soliciting apologies outright, just not apologizing themselves for some of the war crimes committed by the Japanese military in World War II. I think there is some validity to that argument, and it's impossible to deny that's at least the perception in South Korea and China, and perceptions matter. The second downside, and I'd be curious to get your take on this, is that Japanese government officials have been quoted in Foreign Affairs magazine and in the AP today saying that they're concerned about this visit and we're actually sort of dissuading the White House from doing it because of the political climate in the U.S. right now, namely the fact that Donald Trump is the likely Republican candidate for president. And, as you know, Trump has been making this argument that it's wrong for the U.S. to continue to provide military assistance, defense protection, to South Korea and Japan for free. I mean, it's not really free, but essentially we foot the bill to keep our military stationed over there and, in a way, to protect our allies. And so they're concerned that even if the president doesn't go and apologize, that he writes the best possible speech and never mentions the word, and in fact could even turn the pressure on Japan a little bit, that conservative critics, and especially Donald Trump, will be able to spin this and say, not only is the U.S. wasting too much money protecting these wealthy countries in Asia, but then we go over there and President Obama's tail is between his legs and we're being seen as weak. So the Japanese leadership is concerned that, he might spin this, and that in the long term, God forbid, should he become president, could harm the U.S.-Japanese relationship more than if the president were to just steer clear of Hiroshima on this visit. So I think those are two compelling potential pitfalls here.
Interesting. And to be honest, it doesn't matter what Obama says. It doesn't matter what he does. He's wrong. That seems to be the narrative from the right wing of this country. And look, at some point you got to go. It doesn't matter what he could walk on water, and there would be something wrong with it.
Yeah. There are so many ways to spin this possible trip. I'm more inclined to try and find the positives. And as you mentioned, it's maybe good that he's doing all these things for the first time. Even if you're not apologizing and sort of embarrassing the U.S. and admitting our failures on a global stage, there's a lot of value sometimes in just sort of doing things that mean a lot to other people.
Yep.
And so many Japanese have written to the president over the last few years as a part of a letter writing campaign asking him to come to Hiroshima, not again to apologize, but to strengthen the relationship by just committing to some sort of symbolic gesture that puts the past behind us. So again, it's a delicate line. The White House is obviously aware of that, but I'm hopeful and confident that the president will be able to draw out some of the positives here instead of it just becoming a disaster. But I wouldn't put it past the conservative media to try and spin it that way.
Oh no, sure. This is the apology tour part 2 in their view. I mean, look, it is. Look, from the beginning, I want him to fail. From the beginning, It was always no matter what he did. Like I said, he could walk on water and it wouldn't be good enough. I'm glad he's going good. Maybe by doing that, we maybe have the ability to depoliticize it in the future. I'm okay with it. Let's move on. I guess a new report out that we're going to lose, 20% of the plants on the planet are at risk of extinction. What's up with that?
Yeah, it's a pretty grave statistic. This is the world's first global study of biodiversity, I guess cataloging every plant on Earth. 391,000 of them, if you're curious about the big number there, 21% of them risk extinction. It's not climate change, though, which is being blamed here. It's certainly one factor, but the boogeyman seems to be globalization. Essentially, various pests, which in the past would have been confined to a locality or a region and would have only wreaked havoc on sort of a smaller number of species. Those pests are now, making a trip around the world and visiting a whole lot of other plants and, sowing chaos. Essentially, the reach of each of these pests and the number of species they preyed upon is much greater when they get kind of a crack at everything out there. And that is one of the biggest concerns for biodiversity going forward. So again, I know this is not, breaking news. It's probably of most concern to ecologists and people who really like nature and botany. But I always like, there was a great, I don't know if you watch John Oliver, but on his HBO show last week, he had a segment talking about scientific research and how too often scientists do all this great work. And if your study isn't super, super easy to crunch and doesn't have some great headline, that it never gets out there, and that more and more the press is like drawing these wild conclusions from various surveys. And I think that's the segment really emphasized how unhealthy it is when science is only used as sort of a buzz feeding type of news. And I liked this study because I thought it was very clear headed. It said, look, we have a great amount of biodiversity out there. We stand to lose some of it, but there are things we can do to stop that from happening. And again, let's not panic in one direction or another. Let's take steps to protect and to conserve, but let's just not blame. Let's just not find headlines out of every single item. I really like this study.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the climate change that people are going to point to. And the other question I have is how much have we lost to extinction every day for the last 100 years? How many things have gone? Is this the natural evolution of things, or are we really screwing things up badly?
I did not get to that part of the report. I mean, my assumption from this, they said they're discovering about 2,100 new species a year. And from my read of this, things have been going extinct, but we are still discovering more species. That the sort of overall number of known plants in the world is not going down yet. That, right. Of course, at some point, as we keep exploring, we'll find fewer species every year, and the number that's going extinct will increase, and thus we'll start seeing a net decrease in the number of sort of living plant species in the world. But at this point, it seems like obviously there is this huge risk of extinction, but we are still discovering an incredible variety of species. But I didn't dig into it that far. I'm sorry.
There you go. If we could only figure out a way to make those stink bugs that are all over my house extinct, thanks to globalization, and you point that out aptly. Let's move on. Kenya, I guess. What's going on there? There's something with the UN. What's going on?
Well, Kenya made a very surprise announcement last Friday saying they were going to close all of their refugee camps. And I know Europe has been sort of in the headlines for refugees, and we haven't really been talking about Kenya refugees for many years now. And one of the reasons for that is the fact that the refugee situation in that country is quite an old one. Your listeners will remember Black Hawk Down from talking about the 1991 Somalia civil war. Well, that is the conflict that forced most Somali refugees out of the country and into refugee camps in Kenya. So we're talking, a quarter century later, these camps are still filled, up to 600,000 refugees in them.
Wow.
Others of them are from South Sudan, Ellen's, adopted homeland. Others from Burundi, which is having a political crisis. Others from the Congo, still left over from, the genocides there. So Kenya essentially has been suffice it to say, maybe a darling of the international community for some time because it accepted so many refugees in. They are now citing terrorism concerns, fears about al-Shabaab terrorists, as a reason to shut down these camps, saying, look, these are lawless spaces. We're having too much trouble policing them. And instead of trying to, completely overhaul our security forces or rebuild these camps, we're just going to shut them down. So we don't really know in practice how this is going to work.
Yeah, where do those people go?
We don't know. I mean, there's a principle in international law called non-refoulement, which basically says you cannot force people to go back to a country where there's reasonable expectation that they're going to encounter the inhumane and illegal treatment that caused them to leave and be refugees in the first place. And in the case of Somalia, in the case of Burundi perhaps, or South Sudan, you cannot send people back there. So actually how this is going to work is very unclear, but suffice it to say, this is a bad headline at a very bad time. The UN is hosting a big humanitarian summit in Turkey later this month. The goal is to get as many countries as possible to open up new spots for refugees, and to have a surprise announcement like this, where sort of a good guy country like Kenya suddenly caves in to the terrorist security argument, is a very worrisome development, and one that's sort of sending the UN into a panic right now.
Wow. Also, I guess the Turkish president is throwing foreign media people in jail. What's going on with that?
This is the last headline I can get to today, but yes, there's been a spat between the Turkish president, Erdogan, and a comedian in Germany who a few months ago went on air, read a poem in which he sort of accused our authoritarian president, Mr. Erdogan, of being a child molester, of having sex with animals. It was a parody. But there is a law, little known in Germany, that allows foreign governments to open up criminal proceedings against German citizens if they've offended a foreign head of state. It's almost never been used before, but Erdogan, not having any sense of humor, asked that this man be sued, and Angela Merkel said, yes, I'm going to allow criminal proceedings brought against this guy.
Wow.
Seemingly spurred on by that, Erdogan is now suing basically anybody in the media who applauded that comedian for making the joke in the first place. So this is people who wrote op-eds or letters to the newspaper expressing sympathy for the man. I mean, this is just a widening scope here, and it just shows that Erdogan has no sense of decency here and is just going to go after anyone that speaks ill of him.
Yeah.
Only in a country like Germany, thankfully, where this law exists. But still, it's crazy.
You can mock him, but we may have a guy as a president here who wants to do the exact same thing.
Hey, you have to have tough skin if you're going to hurl rocks, and it seems like Erdogan doesn't have it.
There you go. Luke, I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you. Take care.
Great talking with you. Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Coal mining is a filthy business. Literally, miners not only get covered in the soot of their trade, but also suffer the suffocating death called black lung. The industry explodes mountaintops, contaminates mountain streams and drinking water, and causes both acid rain and climate change. Then there are the murders. Oh, they're not called murders, but intentionally sending workers 1,000 feet underground into poorly ventilated tunnels filled with explosive methane gas and coal dust without providing proven safety equipment amounts to signing a murder contract with the Lord of the Underground. That's what Don Blankenship did as CEO of Massey Energy. Recklessly pushing profits over safety, he oversaw the corporate murder of 29 West Virginia miners and the predictable horror of an enormously violent detonation deep inside Massey's Upper Big Branch mine in 2010. Now, at long last, Boss Blankenship has been convicted and sentenced in federal court. Not for murder, though. Under our nation's feeble Mine Safety Act, killing 29 miners is a misdemeanor, and the punishment handed down to this multimillionaire corporate crime boss was merely 1 year in jail and a $250,000 fine. Such soft-on-crime leniency is not the fault of the jury or judge. They did the most with what the law allows for punishing industrial criminals. In fact, Blankenship is the first mining CEO ever convicted of conspiring to violate safety protections for miners. Rather, our corrupt, corporate-serving Congress critters are to blame. Key lawmakers have taken millions of dollars in campaign donations from barons like Blankenship in exchange for reducing corporate murder to a misdemeanor. This is Jim Hightower saying, the filthiest thing about big coal is its immoral use of filthy political money to let its bosses literally get away with murder.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Here's a surprise. A refugee deal between the EU and Turkey is not working as planned. That according to 3 members of the European Parliament who recently visited Turkey and Greece. According to the terms of a recent deal, Turkey is to take back asylum seekers who tried to reach Greece and then process their asylum paperwork. In order to allow vulnerable asylum seekers to be sent to Turkey, the EU had to essentially lower its standards for what constitutes a safe country, and Turkey promised to treat asylum seekers well and quickly review their paperwork. Well, the parliamentarians claim that isn't happening. After conducting interviews at a Turkish asylum camp, they said asylum seekers had not received information about the status of their paperwork and were being denied legal counsel. Turkey claims it's doing nothing wrong, but if there are already concerns about refugee treatment after several hundred asylum seekers have been transferred, imagine when that figure is in the tens of thousands.
Russia. Large, endless, and amazing.
And go east, young man. The Russian government is extending an offer to its citizens to start a new life in the country's remote Far East. A scheme announced by Vladimir Putin will grant 2.5 acres to every Russian who moves to the sparsely populated region and builds a house or a farm. If enough Russians take up that offer, the hope is that the less developed area will begin to modernize. And there's also a geopolitical concern in trying to fill up the East. There are far more Chinese migrant workers living there than Russians, and most of them are there to harvest natural resources. Populating the region with more Russians is seen as a hedge against expanding Chinese influence in an area China could one day want for itself. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Well, I got to get it out of the way. I said I was going to, told my wife that I would. For those who know, today is my birthday. Yay. Last year, I made a joke of labor history in 2, and I said that I didn't play it last year, but I said that I would do it this year. So here it is. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1967. This was the day that Labor History in 2 and the world was gifted with a true oratory genius, a truly modest and humble voice of the people. It was a day that would change the radio world forever. It was my birthday.
Happy birthday, Dad!
So there, yes, I did that, and it was a joke. You know, I got a couple of people who sent me emails because they saw the clip. It was a joke. It was funny. That's what it was supposed to be. Just like I thought the candidacy of Donald Trump was supposed to be a joke. Some interesting polling out by the folks at the Public Policy Polling Center. Today they put out a list of people who would... if running against the Donald and how they would do. Donald against used car salesman. Donald goes down 47-41. Donald against lice. 54% of the people would rather have lice than Donald. Only 28% for the Donald. Nickelback beats Donald 39-34. Traffic jams beat Donald 47-40. Hipsters beat the Donald 45-38. The DMV 50-40 over the Donald, and root canals. Something wrong when you lose to root canals. Just kind of a thought, but the Donald gets thumped by root canals 49-38. And I got to wonder exactly what people were thinking as they answered that series of questions. Now, look, Congress, not much better. Congress gets beaten by cockroaches and herpes. So, maybe the Donald would beat herpes. I don't know. Now, as I've been saying, this idea that it's going to be a sweep, it's going to be a landslide, I don't know. It's a long race. So it'll be interesting to see how things go. Anyway, today, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me here, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about water. And I've been saying for a very long time, water is going to be one of those things we fight wars over. Well, Nestle's got some information that might make that go, well, you never know. Could happen. Anyway, thanks for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tidal flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, and amorous.